Welcome to Australian Hunger. I am your host Ben. On today's episode I have the two guys from the Bsogm podcast, Damian and John Serba. I'm not really sure who I should list first. I mean, kind of seems like if I list one before the other it would be a bit of a hierarchy, but I mean, alphabetical order, so Damian goes first. I had a really long chat with those guys about a week ago regarding, I don't know, is there anything we didn't talk about? Obviously the podcast, the process of the podcast, some of their broader thoughts about heavy metal and its history, and a couple other things. The guys love to talk, and I just let them go, basically. Really enjoyable experience, and I hope to chat to them again. I'd really like to chat to Damian about some of his music. We sort of briefly touched on it, and I'd also like to chat to Serba about music and writing. It'd be interesting to get his perspective a little more on this kind of thing that we do. I don't consider myself a journalist, but what else am I going to call it? Interviewing people, writing about heavy metal, and I'm also a film fan in general, so that'd be really interesting to chat about. But anyway, that's for the future. The interview is that 2 and 40 minutes long. It's a bit of a slog, but I had a lot of fun listening to the guys sort of go back and forth. I think Damian says one or two controversial things, but I mean, we're adults. Like, representation is an endorsement, etc., etc., etc. I don't feel I need to go into detail. I feel like I was almost sitting on a podcast episode myself. So if you enjoy this, definitely go check out their podcast. I mean, it's available pretty much everywhere you get your podcast. You might notice that Damian is a little sick during the interview. And again, I just really appreciate them giving up some time to some random fucking guy from Australia. That's how it is where they're from, basically. I appreciate they giving up time to this random guy. But strap yourselves in. I now want to get into the bit of the history of the show. So I think it's sort of been touched upon, but you guys obviously haven't sort of gone into it in detail because that's kind of not what the show's about. The show's about, Bsogm, and we'll get into what that means a little bit later. But first off, I think this is a key detail. How did you guys meet?
I actually don't know, so I'll defer to Serba because my brain doesn't work.
It was a good
10 plus years,
12 years ago, maybe, or so.
Yeah.
It's just, we both work at, a record store here, Grand Rapids, Michigan, USA. And, I'd been working there, going on 19 years. And he was a customer and eventually became an employee. And I don't know, like, when he was a customer, I used to just you need to buy this. You need to buy this.
Yeah. And
I was the audio consultant.
Yeah. And, although he might be loath for me to bring this up, but he was a famous about town. He wrote for the newspaper for 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So he had columns and stuff like that my mom read. So I was just I started to this guy John Serba. People were like, John Serba. And then, obviously, I was into metal and, extreme metal. Again, we're not supposed to say extreme metal, but we say it. And just Serba and I got, he was into some pretty wild stuff, and I was into some wild stuff, and you just kind of find each other. And, I was just at the store so much. I think now we are the 2 longest tenured employees at the store now.
Yeah.
Over 10 years. But it just reaches a point where you go to people always want to know, how do you get a job at a record store or whatever? And it's you go so much that they're like, okay, help unpack this fucking box.
Yeah. Hey, you want to work record store day? Hey, you want to work Sundays? That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, record store day did not exist at this time. But,
Well, no.
But
sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No. That's what this podcast is about.
Us, or it's just going to be another bullshit old guy metal episode.
Yeah. We have a contentious relationship where I make him mad all of the time, and he doesn't break up with me.
Classic abusive relationship.
Pretty much.
So why did you guys start the podcast? Obviously, you've been friends for a while, have a sort of working relationship in that you're both working at the record store. Why did you guys decide to start a podcast, and specifically this podcast?
Well, man, 2 or 3 years ago, we were road tripping to Chicago to see Absu, maybe, or
sounds right,
or Abath. It was one of those, and I'm the old fuck, and we're driving, and I'm like, I made a mix CD, and Damian says, "What is that? More of that bullshit old guy metal?" And then later on, it was like, you text me and like, we should do a bullshit old guy metal podcast. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And we never really did anything about it seriously until, I don't know, a little less than a year ago. I left my job at the newspaper and I'm like, I have some time. Let's start this thing now.
And I have nothing but time ever, always, because I refuse to have a job. So we both ended up having time to do it. And, I don't know. And I felt that it was important because I started looking around. I listen to podcasts. I love podcasts. I like your podcast, Ben, by the way. We started looking around and there was nothing covering bullshit old guy metal, which was like a pejorative diss towards Serba and all the shit that he was saying or that he was listening to. But there was nothing that was covering this genre or subgenre of music. And I kind of like that even in some small way, Bsogm is catching on to like, people are now, they're like, oh, that band's bullshit old guy metal.
Yeah.
So there's, there's
got to be 14 or 15 people who use the phrase at this point.
Hey, a fire starts with a spark. And, but it's like, it's also like, I hate fun, but it's like a fun, interesting thing. But no, there were no podcasts talking about these bands. I looked around, there were loads of podcasts talking about fucking, I don't know, like new to metal people who are like, let me figure out how Death Heaven works. Yeah. And like figuring that out. There's like a hipster metal podcast. And then you have like a metal podcast show that does like Lamb of God centric bands, like Five Finger Death Punch centric bands. Like, but also like heavier stuff like Behemoth or something like that. And that's not good music. Well, so we want to talk about, and we have cult knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, what else are we going to do with all this crap cluttering our brains?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a point where it's like, who was the guitarist in Death in 1988? And I'd be like, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
It's just all this stuff in my head. And so why not use it? Why not do something, fun and creative? And I think part of it is too, and I mean, we touched on it, where like, we're sort of good cop, bad cop kind of personalities.
Yeah.
And I've listened to other metal podcasts that are like, oh, they're talking about Funeral Mist. It's one of my favorite bands. And it is the most boring 45 minutes ever, because it's just a couple of metal nerds kind of chatting about it or whatever and getting real deep and insightful, which is great. But like, I do think at least we have some kind of rapport,
sexual tension. But like, also we shit on things we don't like.
Yeah,
and frankly,
we're not afraid to do that.
And Serba used to get shit all the time. Not all the time, but like when he was, reviewing movies full time for the paper, you would like slag off a movie if you thought it sucked. I
reviewed music for a long time, and got a lot of flack when, I'd say shitty things about Bon Jovi's concert and whatever, and so it's like I've never been afraid to have that critical voice. And I think some people might be a little afraid to because, I don't know, it rubs people the wrong way. I think it's more interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, but like I think about all the heinous shit that I've said on this show. Not, well, this show, but my show. And I'm like, man, if somebody just walks up and like sucker punches me at a gig, like I can't be that mad about it.
Hey, people have had an open door to sucker punch me at the movie theater or at the local concert venues for 20 years. It's never happened.
Yeah, I have a punchable face though.
So you obviously picked Charlie, the Overkill icon, as the logo. Why'd you guys do that? And I think the obvious next question from that is, why does Overkill inspire kind of a particular obsession, particularly you, Serba, but also you, Damian?
Well, I think, like, when you think of the idea of what Bsogm is, they are the poster boys for it. You know what I mean? Just like this tenacious...
they're working class.
They're working class. They're tenacious. They, one of the big talking points about the band is, like, they didn't break up in the 90s. Testament broke up in the 90s. All these bands broke up in the 90s, and they just kept going. They just put their head down and said, we're going to make this work. We're going to do whatever the fuck we want. And I think that's, and of course they're, they've got the right sound as far as I'm concerned. It's that thrash thing that, like, kind of personifies what my thought of bullshit old guy metal is. And I don't know, they're still a really cool band. They've got a lot of credibility, and they're vital.
Yeah, they're an interesting case because they kind of, for better or for worse, kept it going. But like, why did we pick Charlie? Because I don't know, because I was thinking about it, and I also looked at like all the artwork for all the shows, because I do all the graphics for like my label and stuff like that. So I'm kind of a visual guy, and like the tapes that I make, I always like try to lay those out cool. And I have a theme and aesthetic for all the tapes and stuff. And so I was really trying to find something that would be cool and then like make it our own. But then I was just like, fuck it, let's just steal. Because like, if you look at like the typeface of the Overkill logo, they ripped it from Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
And
I think they italicized it a little.
Yeah, a little bit.
But other than that, it's the same.
Yeah, look at the O. Like, look at defining, like, I'm weird about typography. Like, look at defining features, like O's, S's, G's, and, like, it's the same. But, like, it's total tribute.
Yeah, it's absolute tribute.
And Eddie, okay, that would have been too easy. Vic Rattlehead, that would have been too easy. The guy from Creator doesn't have a name, the little demon head guy, and nobody knows who it is.
Yeah.
But Charlie just, I don't know, it just seemed like the way to go. And I did it also in hopes that Overkill would sue us or something. That'd be great, press for the show.
Could you guys expand on what is bullshit old guy metal? Like, what is it? What does it kind of mean to you guys?
Well, dude, it's just like...
It's someone drilling above you at all times.
Well, it's just like a feeling, man.
It's a vibe.
You just put it on, you go, this is bullshit old guy metal. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of got to be around for a while. It's got to be kind of, Overkill is stubborn,
Yeah.
So there's got to be some kind of stubborn quality. So that obviously, ropes in Mayhem, for example.
Yeah.
That like tenaciousness and and then it's like stuff that you can say I mean I would say Slayer is bullshit old guy metal, and I would never say that they're an underrated band, but there's a component of Bsogm that is not enough people appreciate them, and you can kind of hold them close to you, and I think that's the thing about Overkill or Metal Church.
Church, for sure.
Or, just like these bands that are just toiling away. And who was it we were recently talking about? Mike Scalzi from Slough-Fag.
Yeah.
I will die playing metal in front of 10 people. That's Bsogm.
Yeah.
I wish that was like can we steal that catchphrase?
Yeah.
And make it
for sure.
Make it our tagline for the show.
Yeah. I think, okay, like what's bullshit old guy metal? It's all those things that Serba said for sure, but I think also we're coming up on is it 40 years of heavy metal?
Yeah.
Like we're coming up on 40 fucking years of heavy metal. So it's like to not acknowledge the fact that it's gone through all of these different phases.
Yeah.
And changes is ridiculous. Like I'm a history guy, as you know, from listening to the show. So it's like, it was a reaction because I'm online, not all the time, but I admit I'm online. I'm looking online. And I see a lot of people who are like new to metal who like hop in and it's like the first Metallica record they ever remember was like Load or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or not even that, or like just like Metallica was always the biggest band in the world when these kids were around. Or like, I guess it would I just see a lack of depth in a lot of like young kids that get into stuff. It's like you get into stuff and then you immediately like do the deep dive where you can find every strange, obscure demo tape on YouTube, and they kind of do that, but they don't appreciate like the cultural history of heavy metal. And like that's kind of what Bsogm is. Bsogm is not Black Sabbath. But it's like, it's kind of this stuff that like, it's Dio Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
It's
Tony fucking Martin Black Sabbath.
It's Tony Martin Black Sabbath for sure. But it's like, it's the kind of the, after, I think of Bsogm as like the adolescence of metal. Like you kind of.
Well, and part of it is like, that's, when I was a teenager, it was Overkill, Slayer, Metal Church. Oh my God, stumbling over a Malaya Rage cassette. Just buying it because it's got a dumb logo and a dumb cover. Yeah. And it's like, oh, this is the new thrash band. You put it on. And it for me, it's part of it's a nostalgia trip in many ways.
Yeah.
It's like, what episode should we do next? Damian asks me, and I'm always throwing stuff at him that like I've lived with for 30 years. And you're like, you're very familiar with everything you're suggesting. Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's what it is for me to a degree.
And it's a fun exercise too for me to like critically listen, even though it doesn't sound like I do that at all on the show. It just sounds like I go, this shit sucks, next.
No, you offer more in-depth commentary on some of the stuff than I do. I mean, I do think part of the dynamic of it is though, when you get excited about something, it's easy for me to get excited about it too, and I think vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's happened with so much music, and like I infected you with the Overkill virus.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we kind of feed off of each other in that sense. And I would never, even though you're 10 years younger than I am, I would never say
25 actually.
Yeah, I would. I would never say you don't know what true Bsogm is. You can be 12 and understand it if you think the right way.
Yeah,
and if you get it.
Yeah, and I've made this point on the show too. Like, I would consider myself a lifer at this point because I've been listening to aggressive music longer than I haven't.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been way longer.
Since 1992? When did Nevermind come out? 92, 93?
91.
91? Okay, never mind, 91. And like the first thing I did was I like looked up every Kurt Cobain interview, which you had to do in like Barnes and Noble or like whatever in like magazines, and he would be like, yeah, I like Black Flag and Celtic Frost. And I would look up those bands by going to a record store and going, have you ever heard of Celtic Frost or Black Flag or Dinosaur Jr.?
Yeah.
And they're like, what the fuck is your problem, kid? So, I don't know. That's just my mind is I've always been inquisitive. And Yeah, Bsogm is to sound like an old European thrasher. It is an ancient spirit, and we hold on to that to this day.
Are there any bands, and I know this might be a little bit hard to come up with on the fly, but are there any bands that you think sort of illustrate the sort of difference between being Bsogm and being not Bsogm, like are on the outer limits of the concept?
When you say not Bsogm, what you mean to say is poser, and yeah, no, that's a great question. I guess like
sometimes Bsogm just stretches to mean whatever we think is cool.
Yeah, and that's the best. Yeah.
So we can get as high concept as you want, but that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's
so like
when you create a movement, you get to decide what the fuck it is and isn't. Like,
but also on the other hand, like for a while in the 90s, and I was so heavy into metal, and there was nothing happening except Pantera, you know, so it was like the default thing was Pantera, and Damian hates Pantera, and I don't really care much for him anymore, you know. I mean, it was like, I don't know, I can make as many excuses as I want. I listened to Pantera for a long time, but that's not one of the bands I go back to now. I just don't see as much appeal with him anymore. But we would both say Pantera is Bsogm by far, easily. I think they fit the criteria.
My question is
outside of what we think is cool.
Who are their influences though? Like, what are they like?
Well, I mean, look at their old pre record deal days where they were doing hair metal and Priest.
They're just
covers.
Shitty Van Halen.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. So I don't know who's not Bsogm. Like,
yeah, I mean,
I know you love Converge, but I'm like, I don't know if they would be Bsogm.
No, Converge is not. No, but like
maybe Neurosis is. They're kind of on the edge.
Yeah. I mean, they're a little too artsy fartsy.
But even then, we think they're one of the greatest bands ever.
Oh,
it's inevitable we're going to do an episode about it.
I bought tickets to see them 2 days in a row recently. So Neurosis is there, and it's the only sticker I have on my truck is a Neurosis sticker. But like, okay, like what bands? I'm trying to think. Like, I'm trying to go through the record store bin in my head. like what band would not be like Bsogm? Like Mastodon is not Bsogm.
No, not really.
And it has nothing to do with like the fact that they're a newer band.
Yeah.
Like Municipal Waste gets thrown in there. Like, are they Bsogm?
I mean, they're kind of copying that sound.
Yeah. What bands are like, like we say Lamb of God all the time just because they're a huge popular band that they're not.
Yeah.
Because we say they're not.
And there are bands that are younger than Lamb of God that we would classify as Bsogm.
Yeah. Is High on Fire Bsogm?
Yeah.
See, I would say no.
I think no. They're Motorhead, dude. They're fucking Motorhead.
Overkill is Motorhead.
Yeah, I would say High on Fire is. I would say Sleep is. I mean, anything that's deathcore, no. Anything Death Heaven, no. I would stretch Bsogm to include Motley Crue.
What?
Or Wasp.
Yeah,
sure. Even some of that stuff that's hair metal or bordering on hair metal, I would call Bsogm.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just, it's a vibe, I guess.
That's why I joke and say like, well, it's just kind of a feeling, and do the hippie thing because it kind of is. Yeah, it's instinctive for me.
Right.
We'll sort of more go into the process of the podcast. How do you decide which bands you're going to do an episode on?
You just heard it.
There's usually some contentious texting.
Yeah, I actually got a bug up my ass in January and made a spreadsheet.
Yeah, with
literally every band like filled in, like,
and then he forgets it exists. So I'm the one reminding him, hey,
obituaries this week.
Obituaries this week, or we're doing Brazil.
Yeah.
You made the fucking spreadsheet.
I did.
It's on your computer. I just screenshot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, we kind of figured, we just kind of talk it out, and, like, we're trying to do more, like, interviews. Like, we're doing an interview, our first ever interview tomorrow.
Sunday. Well, yeah.
Tomorrow for you. Tomorrow for our Australian hunger fans.
We're not gonna say we're not gonna say who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not gonna say
it's
yeah.
That's exclusive info.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna work that in too. Just so it's just not us talking all the time and breaking up the pattern a little bit and expanding what the show does.
Yeah. Yeah, we just gotta figure it out and fight it out, and it's not that interesting, really.
Or it's just like, we need to do Death Angel. I've been listening to a lot of Death Angel.
Yeah.
I'm like ready to do that one. Okay,
yeah, for sure. We should do a Death Angel episode.
Absolutely.
Damn, they have a new record coming out. Did you see that?
And they're coming through.
Yeah.
Coming through town.
So, do you have I assume this is probably different for each of you, do you have an approach to listening and researching a band for an episode that you're going to record on?
I do, but you can go first.
I don't know. Not really. I just listen to it a lot. I'll jot down some notes and phrases, and obviously if it's a band I don't know as well, I'll listen more. I had to listen to a fuck ton of Biohazard. It was really rough, I think we routinely joke about like King Diamond, and that was pretty intensive because it covered so much ground.
Yeah.
And you can't really fake it in that sense, Yeah. But like Slough-Feg was easy because I'd listened to those records so much so recently.
Yeah.
Whereas King Diamond, you tend to go back to the same 3 or 4 records, and one of them usually is not the Spider's Lullaby,
Right.
So I don't know. I don't really have a method. I just listen to the stuff while I'm doing dishes or driving and try to soak in it and like, get the vibe of it, understand the vibe of it.
Yeah. For me, I try to I was actually surprised because I never worked with Serba in one of these type of contexts before. But I was actually surprised because I'll kind of sit down and I'll put some headphones on and I'll listen and I'll take notes, and I have a legal pad.
Yeah.
And I take way more notes than Serba. But also I have anecdotes and jokes that I'll write down sometimes because my brain doesn't work and I forget and whatever. And so I'll sit down and I'll open up Metal Archives is a crazy indispensable tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Using the Encyclopedia Metallum.
Well, and I just rely on you to
do all the work.
Okay. Well, to go this album came out in 84 and whatever.
Yeah.
That's your thing. That's the gear you're that gear in the machine.
Yeah. And I think that people want to hear that. I could be wrong, but I think people want to hear some level of and that's what I think is kind of cool about our show.
That's journalism.
And I'm not a journalist ever. Never would call myself that.
You got to have facts in there.
Yeah, but I spray in a lot of bullshit, in non-facts, not on purpose, but that is one thing that I think is cool about the show is that it kind of is. It's almost like backwards academic. Because we have, I'm not saying we go through lineups and producers and where it was recorded, but we'll talk about labels and the bands and the years and stuff like that. But then we also give our input and our takes and stuff. But I take it very seriously. It sounds like I don't, but I really do. I take it quite seriously in my listening and my note taking. I don't know if it comes across in the show, but I definitely try to be academic about it. But also, something I was going to mention, too, in a previous question, why did we start the show? Frankly, all we're doing is just putting microphones up.
Yeah.
These are conversations we would be having anyway.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it wasn't really a huge different vibe for us to start doing this because, we're just basically talking like we do just on mic.
So one thing you've done over the past couple of months is discuss regional scenes. Nawabahum, Italy, Brazil. Is maybe one of those is the answer to my question, but is there a particular regional scene you're interested or fascinated in?
Well, mine for me, we just did. I mean, like
Brazil. Yeah.
If there's anything that's really captured my ears more so in the last few years than ever before, it's Brazil. I mean, one of my first obsessions as a teenager was Sepultura, and the kind of mystique around them at the time, because you couldn't just log into the internet and see pictures of Sepultura. You're like, where are these guys coming from and all this, and so, maybe 10 years ago, it's like, man, there's a lot of bands in Brazil, and this is a huge movement. And in fact, they were, they kind of were around a little before the Norwegian black metal scene and all this kind of stuff. And that's the kind of thing that fascinates me. There's a very distinct kind of raw nature to it that just really appeals to my aesthetic. The aesthetic that I'm drawn to these days, and
excuse me,
because many years ago I'd throw on a 20 years ago I'd throw on a super lo-fi Dark Throne record and go, I don't get this, and I get it now, and so that's why, like, oh, I get that Brazilian stuff now. It is raw. It is some really wild, out of control 17-year-olds with shitty equipment, and there's something magic about that, So that's my obsession at the moment, anyway. Regionally.
I mean, I don't want to give away what we're gonna do next. I don't know why. It's just like how I operate. I don't like telling people what we're gonna do, even like.
Well, and it leaves the door open in case we change our fucking minds.
Yeah, for sure. But like,
and we go, we need to record something tomorrow. I'm not ready. Okay, let's do something we know really well.
Oh, that's never happened before. But like, what scene? It's not on the list, because I think we're only going to do it for the first half of the year, so I think we're halfway through. But the two scenes that I would love to cover. Okay, let me ask you this: is Deathspell Omega Bsogm? I don't think they are.
I don't know.
They're not at all.
No, probably not.
But like, I would love to do like a deep dive on like 2000s French bands.
Yeah.
Like not the LLN stuff, but like basically the No Evdia scene.
Yeah.
I would love to do like a deep dive on that. It's not really hooked into what the show is doing, but like that was a tremendously inspirational time for me to be discovering that stuff when it was coming out. It was so crazy because it still had that air of mystery to it.
Yeah.
And like now, nothing has mystery to it.
Yeah.
Like all mystery is 100% dead in 2019.
Yeah.
Like the best you can come up with is a lie that like you get away with for a minute.
Yeah.
Which is like that Ghost Bath band.
Yeah.
Like they're from like Wisconsin or something, and they're like kept telling people they're from China.
Yeah.
And it's like, this shit's only going to get you so far. Like I remember Velvet Cocoon had a bit where they were like, yeah, we don't play guitars, we play diesel harps. They're these like steam-powered instruments.
Yeah, and it was all crap.
That hammer strings. And anybody who had ever like played a guitar was like, no. But like somebody who like doesn't know instruments could be like, oh, that's crazy. I'm like, no, you just hooked up like 2 distortion pedals and a reverb pedal. But like to somebody who doesn't know, then that's fine. But I would say France, not going to happen on the show. One thing that might happen on the show, and it's not on the schedule, is Sweden.
Yeah.
Sweden is kind of Norway's not on the schedule either, because I feel like we also don't want to tread where everyone else has treaded. And like, yeah, I mean, especially because there's a new Dark Throne record coming out, and we have association with Dark Throne. A buddy of ours is very close with the band. Whatever.
We don't have association with Dark Throne.
No, but we have inside info sometimes. I should say that. We have inside info on the bandits sometimes.
Not much.
I just don't tell you.
Really.
I just don't tell you.
Really. No, we really don't.
We don't.
Don't believe it.
That's not. It's not. I'm not trying to make us seem cool.
Fenris, come on the podcast.
Fenris, come on the show.
Friend of the show.
No, I'm not trying to make it seem like we're cooler than we are. But like, did I hear a track before? Did we hear the new R Noir before it came out? Because we had the rough mixes. Maybe not. But anyway,
that has nothing to do with us. You just happen to know somebody,
right? That has everything to do with me because I know somebody. Bitch, knowing somebody is half the battle. If you didn't know somebody, I wouldn't know it. Therefore, okay, anyway, we're getting off into a Bsogm argument. The point is...
You know someone who knows someone.
That's all it takes.
Someone we know ain't shit.
That's true. He is a bitch. But he's going to come on the show at some point. I would love to cover, like, late 90s Swedish stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What about, like...
Like the Notvite era. Like early Niflheim and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Heavy Load? Would we throw
Heavy
in
Load,
there?
sure. Good Swedish power metal.
For those who cough up big on the Patreon, you get a mixtape. How do you guys go about making those mixtapes?
Serba comes up with a track list.
Which is chronological, you know, like...
Yeah.
Because I was sitting there kind of working too hard and going, why don't I just do this in the order of the episodes?
Yeah.
It makes just as much sense as anything else.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to pace shit. And it's like, so what? We'll put 4 Brazilian bangers at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
And all 4 of them combined aren't as long as the Dark Angel track. I don't know. I throw the track list together and Damian does all the rest of the work. It's kind of like the story of the show is I just kind of show up.
I do the heavy lifting.
Then he does all the technical work.
The heavy load comes from me. Yeah, Serba does that, and I like I said, I kind of get a thrill out of doing the layouts and making them look cool. And I don't know if people think they look cool or not, or people think they're dumb. I think they look sick.
I think they look cool, and I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks.
True. Yeah, so there's not that interesting of a story there. It's
nice font or typeface.
Shut up, bitch.
You pick good typefaces.
Shut up, bitch. Next question.
So this sort of directly relates to that. You guys talk a lot about physical media. It's kind of something which isn't necessarily as widely appreciated in this current day. Talk a little bit about why physical media is important to you.
Well, I mean, I've been working in music stores since I was a teenager.
Yeah, me too.
You know,
I worked in music store. I worked in Christian bookstores that sold music because I was into all that kind of music. Still am, absolutely still into like the good Christian music. Worked at a used CD store before I worked at Vertigo.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely. Both of us have been working around music since we were teenagers.
We both subscribe to streaming services. We both pay for that because we do appreciate the convenience of it. But you know, there's always that go-to. I kind of purposely can't listen to streaming services down in my basement with my stereo and all my records down there, you know, because I want to have that hands-on experience somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be too easy. I still want it to be, you know, interactive in that sense, physically interactive. I think that's part of it because, you know, I've even found myself like taking things for granted just because I can just quick dial it up on my phone and listen to it on the Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah.
You know, anytime I want. It's like, oh, I'm tired of this. Change it like that. You know, I mean, that's what like people my dad's age would say about CDs. Like, oh, you can just skip a track. Boom, press a button. Skip a track. Skip a track.
Yeah.
You know, boom, press a button. Skip a disc. You got a disc changer. You know, so I mean, I that idea isn't anything new, but it's almost too easy. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm falling on the same tropes that everybody does when they're asked about physical media. Is like, well, you know, I don't know what it's like for a 17-year-old who wouldn't know any better. You know, although we do get a lot of 17-year-olds coming in buying vinyl.
Brace yourself. So, hold on to your butts for the D-Man's hot take.
Yeah.
Physical media is crucially and critically important. However, I am sick. This is not a reflection on your question. I appreciate your question. I am sick to fucking death of having to explain like why a record is cool. And we live in a culture now where like people are so obsessed. Like literally, look, like just now on my phone, I have a group text in my band. What did somebody just send? It's a picture of my vinyl record on someone's shelf.
On Instagram.
On Instagram. So it's a screenshot. Somebody just texted me literally 5 seconds ago. And I think people that's where physical media exists now. It's this Instagrammable moment, which is evidenced by a couple of different things. And I don't mean to go on a tirade, but bitch, for the next 2 minutes, I'm doing it. Like,
make it 40 seconds.
Okay.
Go.
We have things like limitation in like colored vinyl and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
People like the exclusivity of physical media, and that's cool, and I like that. But it becomes this thing where it's like I always say, like,
look how cool I am.
Yeah,
I have like pink splatter.
Yeah, buy the CD. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's cool to own it. And I feel like we have like a generation of kids. Like, I remember, like, because I'm the very first internet age, where like I had the internet as like a preteen. You know, it was shitty and crappy, but like, you know, like
it was both shitty and crappy.
Yeah,
that needs to be.
But like my grandpa or whoever, like, who would drive, you know, hours and hours and hours in dead silence, not for any other reason other than just like he didn't. Not that he was like, I don't want the stimulation, but just because he enjoyed the sounds of driving and time in his head. And like we live in a time where we're constantly being saturated with all of this stuff, and that only goes so far. And I think physical media ties into it because you have this tactile thing you can hold on to, and it's important and it's cool and I love it, and I'm going to die on that hill defending it forever. But I kind of just like, for some kid who's like 15 or 16 or 17 years old, and vinyl is awesome and it's saved our business and it's made things go really, really well for us. But I'm kind of sick of explaining it to like trying to sell this thing to a kid or to somebody who doesn't care. Because ultimately, I guess the music is what matters.
Yeah.
So if somebody's obsessed with metal and all they do is stream it, but they're listening to it and love it and they're committed to it, I think it's weird as fuck. But what do I like? Who am I to judge that? Like,
I don't know. We're just leaning on what we know. What
and I mean,
and all that. But I think that's what it boils down to. I would like to point out that the youngest out of the two Bsogm hosts is the one who has way more kids these days. Rants. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, because I'm fucking interacting with them, unfortunately. It sucks. But like, yeah, I mean, can I ask you a question real quick? Like, do you collect records? Not collect, but do you have records? Do you have CDs? Do you have cassette tapes?
So I have a bunch of CDs back from when I was a bit younger, and I have a few vinyls for some of the bands that I particularly appreciate.
Yeah, so do you kind of buy things on the basis of like, I'll listen to it, and then like, okay, let's say, just pick a band we probably like, Iron Maiden or whatever. Like, oh, I love this Iron Maiden record. This record's great. Therefore, I'm going to make the investment to buy it on vinyl. Is that kind of how you do something?
Yeah, so it's not Iron Maiden for me, although I'm a very big fan of Iron Maiden. Right. But so I've got one of my favorite bands, Agalloch. I've got all their records on vinyl.
Okay, cool. Agalloch's great.
That's exactly the mentality.
And I think that's I think that's like the mentality of a lot of people. Whereas like my mentality was just like, it's a way to discover stuff, is like you just go out and buy it. And I think that like you get a certain level of appreciation. I'm not saying like what you do is wrong or anything like that, or weird or anything like that. But like, I just like it. We just come from a different era. You know what I mean? Where it's like, that's just how we consumed media back then. Was you bought it, and like I find myself, this has been said so many times in other interviews by other people, but and it's hard as someone who owns a record label and puts out music. Your best song and the best part of your best song should be in like the first 15 seconds of your record, because that's how long you have before people are like, if they're not caught, if they're not interested, like they've moved on. So it's like, the thing about buying music was like, I spent $14 on this CD. I'm going to leave it in my car for a while. And I've like come to appreciate a lot of things that I didn't like on my first spin. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what you do or how other people do it. Or...
There's something to be said with psychoanalyze this as you will, but like I sit in my room surrounded by media, and it's like there's my little nest. It's my little safe space.
It's the witch's hole.
It's where all this cool shit that I can listen to. Look at all this potential. Look at, I have 4,000 things I could listen to right in this room.
And I'd be a fucking liar if I didn't.
And that is fun.
Yeah, I'd be a fucking
just
liar.
Grab something, throw it in. And
if I didn't say that holding the record in my hand made me feel good.
Yeah.
Like it just does, And like for some kids who like are listening to the show or doing stuff, maybe they don't have that experience of like putting on a record or whatever. And like it was totally CDs in my generation, like, and vinyl's now cool and it's awesome and I love vinyl but I've always bought vinyl too.
Yeah.
I've always bought it. But now it's just so prevalent, it's everywhere. But it's one of those things like if you like don't get it, like that's fine. Like I'm not mad at you anymore, like, but also
you can't change where you came from and when you were fucking born and what was what the world was like around you. That's we're products of that.
Yeah, but also then you have to realize that we're going to lament the fact that record store culture is an incredibly important and vital thing. And when a record store goes away and everyone is so sad about it, because like, oh, I got so much cool music there and I discovered cool music there because I was like talking to the guys and they like showed me this and that and the other thing. And it's like, how many records did you pre-order last year? How many records did you decide that you were just going to buy online because you wanted them right then and there, rather than like the experience of going in and talking and asking them? And you know what happens is 9 times out of 10 we have the fucking record on the shelf.
Well, okay. Let's move on to the next question, or Damian's going to get angry about the record store, physical media business.
My bad.
Even more.
My bad.
So I want to ask this question. It's funny, actually. Ghost was at the Download Festival that I tweeted at Damian about, where Slayer was playing as well. Obviously, I went to see Slayer, not Ghost. But you guys have, I think in particular Damian, have talked quite frequently about Ghost and Lamb of God and how you don't like them. Expand a little bit on why you have focused on those two bands.
Oh, because like I joke all the time about how my brain doesn't work. I literally think something happened to me and I can't remember shit anymore. It's just like, those are just the go-to. Like, I shit on Behemoth a lot, too. Just because I think those are the big
Behemoth actually played there as well.
Of course they did.
Well, those are bands that have kind of transcended the underground.
Yeah.
The rare ones in the last 15 or 20 years that have become something more than just, a Century Media, a big act on Century Media or whatever, I don't know. I think part of it is like, I don't know. I could go down the list. Lamb of God, I think, is just boring. I like their first couple of records.
That sucks.
But I never go back to them. And then they do this Pantera thing. We already talked about how like the Pantera aesthetic doesn't appeal. It's funny because we went to Maryland Death Fest. The one time we went, we saw the first ever American show by Ghost. And we watched a couple of songs and went like, I don't know about this. And like, it was the last show of the last night.
Everyone was just
tired.
Everyone was
Let's
tired.
Get out of here.
Hungover.
We've been drinking for 4 days, and and our eardrums are fucked. And like, I saw Ghost touring for their first record, and they were with Mastodon and Opeth. They played 30 minutes, and they had like, I think they still have about like 25 minutes of good material. And I was like, okay, that's a cool show, 30 minutes, and that's the extent of it. And it's funny because that year at Death Fest, Ghost was one of the headliners, but like at 2 PM we saw Repugnant play.
Bitch, I made you go see Repugnant.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, dude, you have to come see this band.
Yeah.
They're so sick. You're like, what are they? I'm like, they're death metal, but I like them.
Yeehaw!
Yeah. And you were like, I don't know. And then I remember you were kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. And then like 3 songs in, you're like, oh, this is really good.
This is pretty cool, yeah. And then like you buy the record and it's front to back bangers,
Yeah, it's
and so like
ridiculously good.
Repugnant.
Yeah, Repugnant rules.
Bsogm as fuck.
Totally.
I mean, that's like, put out one record and EP
and what's funny about Repugnant is that
all great.
How catchy it is.
Yeah.
So it's like you'd think that Ghost would write a catchy song every once in a while, but they don't. The other thing too is like there had to be a band at some point that broke through the mainstream. And they are a mainstream band. I think they get played on mainstream radio.
For sure.
They have a Dave Grohl cosign. They
played in Los Angeles, like headlined an arena gig, you know? I mean,
they play like Coachella type places, you know. They're just a satanic kiss, and it's just like, I mean, why do I shit on these big bands? That's because they fucking suck, but I don't shit on them just because they're big. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If Overkill was that big, we wouldn't be shitting on them.
I don't shit on Metallica.
No.
And Metallica's 10 times bigger than them.
Yeah.
And I don't shit on Motorhead or Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Or Judas Priest.
Yeah. Behemoth just has... and granted, I like some bands that have clean sound. You know, like newer Rotting Christ albums are very clean.
Yeah.
And I think they're amazing, though. But Behemoth has this sort of antiseptic thing happening to my ears. And I don't know. To me, Behemoth,
they have no foot in any one thing. It's like...
Yeah.
They're a death metal band. They're a black metal band. They're a gothy part. They have like gothy parts. They're
trying very hard to be artsy.
Yeah, then they have these high concept like art parts.
I almost think it's like a little too contrived to my ear. Maybe I don't know. I think Adam Darsky, Nergal, whatever you want to call him. I think he's a fascinating person.
Okay.
And I would much rather. I haven't read his book, but I keep meaning to. I would much rather read his book than listen to the records. You know.
Do you like the old Behemoth, the early demo stuff?
There's a couple of them. There's a couple of them. I mean, and
when they were hardcore racist.
No, but like they did that like kind of Nile-y Egypt record. I forget what it is.
Oh, really?
Demigod or whatever, and it's got like, wow, this is some really really catchy, interesting riffs and stuff going on there. You know, do I ever listen to them? No, I don't. No. There's 19 Overkill records.
Yeah. I don't shit on these things because I know that it makes me look like a hater. And I am 100% a born hater.
Yeah.
A full-on hater. But like some shit just needs to be hated on, and I'm there to do it. I also hate on bands that have literally no fans. Like some local band. I'll clown them too. I don't give a fuck. Like if you suck, you suck. Like it's not a jealousy thing. Do I wish that I was as big as Ghost? Fuck yeah. But I'm not like jealous about it.
Damian, you're about 10 years younger than Serba. I'm probably about 10 years younger than you. And it basically means...
How old are you?
26.
Okay.
So it basically meant that I kind of skipped the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, which is something you touch on occasionally, as a pretty bad time for heavy metal. I was wondering if you could sort of expound upon that and sort of explain... like. What that kind of what sort of happened? Like why heavy metal kind of died, and what was that like for people who are fans of that kind of music?
Well, I'm gonna let Serba answer, because Serba lived through that.
Yeah,
I lived through like the tail end of it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Overkill in 1996. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Played to 72 people, you know,
yeah.
and their record was a little more groovy, you know, more in that kind of Pantera style. And I saw Creator when they were touring behind their worst record, you know, but you go to see them because they're Creator.
But also they didn't have that ancient old cult spirit at the time, you know. Pleasure to Kill was just an album that came out 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't like we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of this touchstone of Teutonic underground thrash metal. They were just an old band at that point.
Well, I mean, the difference is there just wasn't the bounty that there is today. You know what I mean? I mean, and I'm thinking, because the record store opened in 2000, and I was pretty heavy doing music journalism in the late 90s, so I was heavily bombarded with a lot of music. Frankly, I would open my mail and get a giant pile of CDs from Nuclear Blast,
promos,
or the Music Cartel, which was that kind of stoner metal thing. And I think if you looked hard enough, there's some really cool stuff. I would say that between that particular era, the late 90s and the early 2000s, you had some pretty, I look back on some of the like Dimmu Borgir and Emperor records that I listened to a lot at the time and go, you know what, that was pretty cool at the time. That was sort of
Cradle fucking rules.
Yeah, Cradle of Filth. So you had like Europe was kind of holding things down in that sense. And then on the other hand, that was like when Queens of the Stone Age, what was doing really cool, heavy. We used to have a stoner rock section.
Yeah,
I had a few rows of stoner rock at the store. And it was a lot of that Man's Ruin.
Man's Ruin, yeah.
Man's Ruin label. Music Cartel
stuff that like TP Records exists now.
TP Records,
that zone.
And there's a lot of cool shit there too. I mean, you look back and you go like, oh, there's some gems. There's some really good Fu Manchu and Nebula and Fatso Jetson records that were coming out then that were heavy and cool and catchy and riffy. So I mean, you maybe had to look a little harder than you do now. And granted, that was an era when like Megadeth would come through and play the 1,800 seat venue and not sell it out.
Yeah,
I think I'm close.
Yeah. I think
I'm close.
like what? Okay, the question was like, what led to metal dying in like the 90s? And the answer, I think, is that like, I think at the time, like we live in a totally different era now with the internet and interconnectivity amongst people. So like, we don't live in an era now of dominant culture.
No.
We live in an era of many dominant cultures. Like, to somebody, and not just to somebody, to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, Gucci Mane is the biggest rapper alive. He's bigger than Kanye, he's bigger than Jay-Z, he's bigger than whatever, because of the influence and reach that he's had. Similar things could be said of Lana Del Rey with new kids that love her stuff, or Ariana Grande, or what the fuck, fucking Foo Fighters, or Kings of Leon. You have these like, there's no like dominant culture. There's no one band that sort of everybody gets behind.
Well, I think the way it used to be, things would be cyclical. Yeah. And I think they still are a little bit to a degree.
Oh, for sure. But I see that in hardcore a lot.
But like the late 90s and 2000s is like Napster internet, where like all of a sudden the cyclical nature of things was just starting to get blown to bits, Yeah. And I think things are still cyclical within there, where like all of a sudden people are giving a shit about those 80s thrash bands like Testament and Anthrax and Overkill now, where Overkill has a more lucrative career than they did at the time. So I just saw that like, metal had peaked and fallen, and I think it was ramping up a little bit because you had some of these labels like Century Media and Nuclear Blast and Relapse were growing at the time,
Yeah, and
finding the good bands and making sure people heard them, within that kind of old style of of the music.
I also can't express how unfucking cool it was to be a metal fan in the 90s.
Oh yeah,
it was like the least cool, like. It was a dinosaur shit. Like, Like, I'm trying to think now.
It wasn't cool when I was in high school either,
Right, but now the thing is, like, we live in a culture now that, like, we live in a culture now that almost rewards subculture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because subculture is a designator of coolness.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're into that band.
You're into comic books.
Right.
Geeks are cool,
geeks are cool now.
When I was 14, comic book kids were exiles.
Yeah.
I was one of them. Right. So.
And I was the guy, had I been in Serba's high school, I would have had his head in the toilet.
Yep, he would have been beating me up.
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't have.
I would have.
No, he wouldn't have.
I might have.
I had a toe in every subculture.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
I was the smart kid with the Slayer shirt and mullet.
Gotcha. But yeah, like Cradle of Filth, when I got their I got their record in 90, was it 8 that Cruelty came out?
I can't remember.
96 maybe? 96?
No, 96 was Dusk and Her Graves.
Okay, so 98. So like when I got that Cradle record, it was like, it's just funny because Cradle of Filth now they're like cool again.
No, they're not that cool.
But they're not that cool. But like for a while they were like the least cool band.
Yeah.
Like just the band that everybody clowned on. Like, have you not heard their records? Like they fucking rip. But they put out some kind of bummer records. But
yeah. Well, I mean, like, why clown on Cradle when you can clown on Dimmu Borgir, who are way more of a fashion show than they ever were?
Yeah, for sure.
Way more of a fashion show than Cradle ever was. But like, yeah.
But the matter of fact is like these bands kept something going.
Yeah.
When, something kind of, for lack of a better term, extreme. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess Serba kind of answered the question. I don't want to take up too much time, but it's going on about that. But yeah, I mean, you're of the age where like you kind of came up and like metal was a cool thing to be into. Yeah. Like I always liked punk rock and hardcore, which was always kind of had like this cool built-in subculture thing of like, this is cool, but like I was always the punk and hardcore kid. They're like, he also listens to metal. And it was just like, it was kind of like frowned upon. But now who's cool, bitch? It's me all the time. Next question.
So at that show I went to, Judas Priest played, Slayer played. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Obviously Slayer has an intentional deadline of when they're finishing up. Judas Priest will probably have a deadline that may be imposed upon them at some stage.
Yeah.
Where do you think heavy metal goes after those bigger bands go away just because of necessity? I mean, there's a time on all these things. They can't escape forever.
So yeah. This is where Damian brings up this topic, and I put my fingers in my ears and go la 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 la, because I don't want to fucking hear it or think about it. I don't want to think about a time when, there is no new Overkill record to look forward to.
Not even
and it's finite because I people are like, what newer bands do you listen to? And I go, I listened to that Tomb Mold record 1.5 times. You know what I mean? Yeah. I get that, and that deadline is going to happen before I'm dead. Hopefully, hopefully I won't walk out of here and get hit by a train. But that's a terrifying concept to me, and we're starting to see it because Slayer is like, we're done.
I bring that up.
Lemmy is dead.
Yeah, I brought that up to Serba because he was kind of like, well, I think I was talking about Maiden or something like that, and I was just like, I'm going to go see them as many times as possible because they will cease to be a band most likely within my lifetime.
Way sooner than you will ever want them to, too.
Yeah, and actually, which is funny because I just saw a thing from Bruce Dickinson today where he was like, we have no reason to retire.
Yeah.
We'll go on indefinitely. Yeah. Which, like, I mean, Nico McBrain's 66 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and my one of my big hangups is, so, like, not to get, like, too personal or deep, but, like, when you and I went with a couple other people and saw Maiden, what was that, 6 years ago or whatever, and it was the first time I had ever seen him. And I was standing there, like, watching the guy in front of us bring his, like, 12-year-old or 10-year-old kid to see fucking Iron Maiden. Yeah. And I went, Jesus. And And since then, I'm like, that's one of the things that convinced me to have offspring. Frankly, this is not a lie. And so now
my man had a kid so he could take him to an overkill show. Call the law. Call the law.
But last week I saw Metallica, and I'm like, fuck, I wish my kid wasn't 4. I wish he was 8.
Wish you would have busted that nut 8 years ago.
Yeah, and he'd be seeing this with me right now, and his mind would be blown. Right now, I can go like, you want to listen to some metal? You go, yeah. You want to listen to some Iron Maiden? Yeah. And I'll show him the phone, and he'll go, I want that one. And he points to the number of the beast. He doesn't know what he's pointing at. He sees a cool color and some monsters.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm rambling off topic because I don't want to think about the demise of all of my favorite bands.
I think your question is amazing because it's something that I literally have brought up recently, that like I'm not a huge like show goer at all. I hate going to shows. I hate everything.
You don't hate going to shows.
I didn't go see Metallica, a band I love.
It's partly my fault you didn't go.
Yeah, but realize how little it took for me to not go.
I don't know. It's not.
It's neither here nor there. I also am just a born hater for everything.
You're so up and down when it comes to that though, because there are times like, dude, we've got to go see fill in the blank, and we hop in the car and we get a hotel and we drive, and that's effort. That is not someone who hates going to shows. So don't overstate it. Okay. I know there are times where it's like,
all right, shut up, you old bitch. Let me
just
finish.
like I'm going to see this because it's down the street, and I feel obligated to see whoever.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel less obligated if it's down the street. I'm like, nah, fuck that. I'm not.
They are. This isn't very exclusive. They're playing our
it's like
second or third tier
it's
market.
Like if Pearl Jam was playing in my backyard, I'd fucking go get gas or something.
Yeah,
it's like
But
those bands, like it's interesting to think because it's like we are kind of living in that golden, like fucking Ozzy Osbourne is going to die.
Yeah, he is.
Like
soon.
He was supposed to play at that show, that festival that I was at, and he was sick, so he didn't play.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things. Like we're seeing. I mean, I think Lemmy really shook a lot of the community.
Yeah,
of the metal community. Like you saw, like a lot of guys, like, like I guess you really can't live forever because you have guys like Keith Richards and whatever. Who are
and I think the difference is, I mean, we've seen a lot of people die early, like Peter Steele and whatever, and so the first one was Dio,
right?
Who died. He was old, but he died a little bit young. Yeah. And Lemmy is the same kind of deal where like, was he even 70 yet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden your immortal heroes are fucking mortal as hell.
Yeah.
And there's that mourning, that despair you feel when it's like, there is not going to be a new Motorhead record.
I think you're a little bit fucking weird about it because you have despair about it. Like,
well,
I think most people,
I'm not saying
most people aren't like avid like fans enough of metal to be like, I want to hear a new Motorhead record.
No, but I'm talking about my own experience where I am the one who every 20 months was like, fuck, first day Motorhead record buyer, you know? And that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I would
and I'm going to see Metallica, and I'm like, is this going to happen again? These guys could just like wrap up this cycle, and they go, you know what? I think we're done.
Yeah, Lars could just go.
I've got like $40 million in my pocket.
Yeah, Lars could just literally go like, fuck this. I'm just going to collect art, and no one's going to be mad at him. But I mean, it's like that'll be the end of it,
Yeah.
And it's like we live in a time. It's an interesting time. We missed a lot of good stuff. Like, a huge regret. Like, and it's funny too, because I really shouldn't be so anti-shows as I am, because I pass up shows all the fucking time. Like, I could have seen Typo Negative.
Yeah, well.
And I didn't. Like a dumbass. I regret that. I'm like, there were other things too that I could have seen and regretted. But we live in like a golden era. So like, I think it's cool for like you, Ben, to like go to a festival and to be able to see Slayer. Oh, you know what was funny is that I told the story on the show. Someone gave me a ticket to the Megadeth, Slayer, Anthrax show.
Yeah.
That was at
it was the big three.
The big three was at Deltaplex in town. And the reason I didn't go was because I said Jeff Hanneman's the only cool guy in Slayer. And I didn't want to see three fucking losers on stage.
Yeah.
And that was literally the reason I didn't go.
And that was
the last time he played in town.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, and that's just me being a fucked up loser. 99% of the people who are listening, actually strike that, 100% of the people who are listening are like, you're a moron. And I am. But like, we're living in a finite time, like, and it's not going to happen. These bands aren't going to be around forever. So go see the bands, like, even if it's a member down, or two members down or whatever. Go see them. Like you saw Priest.
Oh, it's funny you mentioned Anthrax. Anthrax actually played as well, but I got bored and so I walked away.
Hell yeah, dog!
Blasphemy!
I've seen Anthrax. I've seen Anthrax 15 times. I can't tell you a single fucking thing about them. They are wallpaper. They're like, they're forever opening for a show that I'm at. Like whatever show that Serba drags me to, I'm like, oh, Anthrax is opening, great. So I'm with you, but I think Anthrax probably speaks more to your age, and also like my age too. Like, even though I'm 10 years older than you almost, but
the thing is, like, Anthrax were normal dudes, but they were big and colorful too. That's why they were huge for a little while in the 80s, And I don't know. I think they have a distinct sound to them. They're not just another thrash band.
I think they distinctly suck.
I mean, they don't. I think they're a thrash band, but they transcend it a little bit, and not just because they did
into what direction I don't know.
They did a hit song with Public Enemy or whatever.
Right.
But I could throw on Spreading the Disease right now, and that album fucking will rock you.
I fuck with Fistful. I fuck with Fistful too.
Whatever. But
all right, whatever. Next question. This guy's a fucking loser. Talking about Anthrax.
I'll die on the Anthrax hill.
Yeah, you go for it.
It's an ant hill, but I'll die on it.
Yeah, it's a very small hill.
Something that I think that's come up quite a few times, particularly in the Overkill episode, is the idea that a lot of these people aren't the Metallicas. They're not, getting rich off this. They're not even necessarily able to survive off of playing music. And it's almost like metal in a way is something you kind of suffer for. What do you think that sort of role in this kind of music is?
So, can I take the lead on this one? It's interesting because I was actually just talking to one of my buddies who is like actually a Suffocation fan. Mm-hmm. And I think the singer from Suffocation posted, I could be wrong, but I think he posted he's an old white guy, so I'm just going to go ahead and go on a limb and say this is true. Mm-hmm. He posted a bitching rant on Facebook about how he loves the band, but he's got a house in the suburbs and he's got 4 kids and it's just not working anymore.
Well, yeah, and he's leaving the band. They're going to replace him, so they're doing this big tour.
Yeah, and he's leaving the band because tour, he can't be in Suffocation because it's not fiscally manageable or responsible for him to be in Suffocation.
Yeah.
And my thoughts are a couple of things, if I may. And one is that a lot of these bands probably mismanage things because they have 2 or 3 road guys, they have a light guy, they have a sound guy, they have a merch guy, and it's like they're not keeping close track of where that money goes. Mm-hmm. Whereas the scene that I came up in, the DIY more punk and hardcore scene, you maybe had a guy that didn't do t-shirts for you.
Yeah.
And it's then the money got split much more evenly. So as a result, you see quite literally hardcore bands playing to 200 to 300 kids a night, making less money, but reserving a larger percentage of it, and therefore surviving better than a band that, don't get it twisted. Suffocation does fucking well in Europe and other places that they don't have that infrastructure to they just, I don't want to say they're mismanaging, but also it's just like, yeah, I mean, nobody's getting rich, but also you look at like Overkill and like it's their job. Like
that's their 40 hours a week. You know, that's the thing. They took over their own management.
Exactly.
They invested in their own studio and that kind of stuff.
Dee bought his own studio shit, and they did that, and so they started recording themselves and doing their own demos. Mm-hmm. And then like Bobby manages the band. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, like that's how you make a living, is that you do the work.
But, you know, it's easier to make a living now. Because Overkill, there's a thing where, like, you know, maybe you're not selling a lot of records like you used to. Overkill is probably selling more copies of From the Underground and Below in 1997 than they are of their new one.
For sure.
Right now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But they can make more money now, and the record is almost, you know, the hood ornament at this point on the car. But I think... I don't know. From a practical standpoint, you know, I think Chuck Billy and Eric Peterson live in nicer houses than they did 20 years ago. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I will also say, on a less practical standpoint, in a way more, you know, humanistic approach to things, anyone who's on the road half the year, that's suffering. You know what I mean? That's suffering for your art. That's a dedication to it that not a lot of people do. I mean,
I'm hesitant to pat someone on the head because they had like the daily grind of like, get up, get on the bus, or get in the van, or like get on the plane, check in out of the hotel, and again, every city looks the same. Then you sound check, and then you got to eat bad food, and then you got to sit on an uncomfortable couch, and then it's like, you do your thing, but it's like, dude, if you worked a day job at home, it's like you'd have to like get up. It's 90 fucking degrees outside, and you have to mow your lawn, and you got to go pick up. You know, it's all the same. It's bullshit that these people suffer. Like, fuck you, you're not suffering.
Traveling.
Yeah, traveling sucks.
Traveling taxes the human body.
Yeah, it does, and it taxes.
So don't discount that.
And it taxes relationships at home. Like, a lot of these guys are married.
No. But then beyond that, it's like it takes a certain constitution of person to go for Blitz to be like, yeah, this is what I do, you know?
Yeah.
And you've acclimated yourself to that. And the guy from Suffocation is like, I'm worn down, you know?
Yeah, but I think a lot of it too is like these bands are like getting older. And a lot of them have, like, families and stuff like that, and kids and that sort of thing. And, like, yeah, you be gone 6 months out of the year and see how your wife likes it. You know what I mean? And it's like, she might appreciate it that, like, the bills are being paid or whatever. But, like, that's difficult to be in that relationship. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, you want to, like, see your kids grow up and do stuff like that. Like, there's that documentary, The Other F Word. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that?
No.
It's about punk rock guys who are dads. So it's about fatherhood.
Okay.
And it was like, with the main dude in the band was a singer from Pennywise. And the tension in the band was exactly that. It was that he was the guy in the band who, like, got married and had a kid. Mm-hmm. And, like, while the other three guys in the band were kind of like, it kind of painted them poorly. Like, drinking and partying and like, yeah, we'll go on tour. He was just like, okay, yes, I will go on tour, but, like, I really want to be home in January because that's, like, my kid's birthday or whatever, you know? Yeah. And it's like, and them not understanding it and, like, or caring. But that's a side point.
There's a component to it.
I want to say something about getting rich, too. Don't let me forget.
There's a component to it where some of these guys are 9-to-5ers and they might take a 2 weeks vacation from whatever their job is, whether they're a dentist or a drill press operator.
Yeah.
And that is a level of dedication that I have a lot of respect for, because as someone who did the 40-hour-a-week thing and has a family, and I'm like, man, where do people find the time to write songs and put out a record and play and get together with people. You know, that's a level of dedication. That's like, you know, there's some suffering there too, where you're something has to give, just in a purely practical time management kind of thing.
Sure.
You know, and or there's these guys who, you know, work the shittiest job at the post office or whatever, and come home,
work at Guitar Center,
and the only thing they can do to feel better about themselves is to sit down and write some fucking riffs.
Yeah, I mean,
you know. So,
I don't know. I'm not going to even speak on that because I don't give a fuck about anybody or anything other than myself. But like when people are talking about getting rich off of metal has something that like rap doesn't have. Like every rapper, like when you sell a few thousand records or you do a few shows and you get like you get some money, like rap, like what's the first thing you do? You get some jewelry, you get a chain, you get some teeth, you get whatever. And like punk rock and hardcore and heavy metal, like rappers will openly say like, all I got is this chain on my neck, but I got it. You know what I mean? Like I earned this chain. Mm-hmm. By working hard, staying in the studio, putting out these songs, and like I earned this chain. And they're not saying like, oh, I'm like a fancy car, or they'll buy a fancy car or whatever. But it's like they're very proud of the fact they've earned that because that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And like in punk rock and heavy metal and hardcore, it's like Eric, like just pretend. Eric, we love you. Eric, please come on the show. But like, what if you found that like Eric Peterson drove like a Land Rover? You're like, wow, you're making that much money on Testament, huh? You can drive a fucking Land Rover? You know what I mean? Or like, it's almost a dirty word to be financially rewarded for this like blue collar, anti-hero, anti-authoritarian music. Whereas I'm just like, I would love to think that like Chuck Billy can not have to worry about where he's going out to eat.
Yeah.
He can spend a fucking whatever he wants, and he can go on a vacation and like live in a nice house. And I think that these metal bands, a lot of them make the grind because I think by and large, metal fans are blue collar working class people. It's not like high concept jazz where it's like you have academic types who are like college people who live a certain lifestyle, and that's the kind of music that they're into, nor is it teenage music like Ariana Grande or whatever, where it's like she knows that her fans are like getting CD money from their parents.
But you know what?
Metal is just
people are just, no matter who they are, people are complicated. They're bundles of contradictions. Everyone's a hypocrite. And the fact of the matter is there are some people who are driving a Land Rover and are fucking angry at the world. You know, so there's nothing wrong with driving a Land Rover and turn around and writing "fuck you to the world" songs.
Oh, I don't have that problem at all.
People are complicated, you know. So yeah, that's my counter to that kind of.
Well, no, I didn't want you to think
black and white
that, but I didn't want you to think that was my point.
No, I'm not. I'm just ranting against the people who are going to make judgments like that. And,
and I also think too that it's just
look inward, don't project outward.
Talking to me?
I am.
Oh. But like, I also think too, it's a bit gauche. It's a bit gauche, and it would be really dumb if like Kanye like has a tour and then comes home and just like tweets a picture of him on a bed of money. Everyone's like, that fucking rules. Like, that's wild. That's sick. Jay-Z is a fucking billionaire. But like, if like Testament made a shit ton of money on tour, and they were like, we made so much fucking money, this is insane. Like Chuck Berry like posted a picture of him with like $100 bills raining on top of him. People be like, fuck you, asshole.
No, it's just a different world and a different aesthetic.
It's a different world, it's a different aesthetic. So I think that when bands talk about not being rich, I'm not saying they're like, of course you're not rich, but like you're providing.
Well, I mean,
you're doing all right.
Yeah.
You're doing all right.
Yeah, Ben, just so you know, whenever Damian starts talking about rap, I start to fade. I fade into the background. You know, start yawning.
Fade to black.
It's
like
just
There's a Jay-Z song called Fade to Black. There should be a
I
metal
know.
song called Fade to Black.
Yeah, there should be.
Anyway,
There should be.
sorry.
Something you've touched on is controversial lyrics, statements, and beliefs about some of the bands you've covered. That's something that you don't really seem to engage with Serba in any of the episodes. I was wondering if you could sort of expand upon why that is.
Why I don't engage with it? Because other people have said things about it that's more interesting than what I'm going to say. And this just comes back to the people are contradictions. You know, I mean, do I subscribe to murder and whatever Cannibal Corpse writes about? You know, no. Does it? Who does? Who is a Cannibal Corpse fan who's going to be like, yeah, I'm going to go home and fucking kill some people and rape the dead body? You know? So I just think that it's such a complicated subject that to sit down and to make any kind of broad statement about it, I don't know. Have I burned my Bsogm records? I haven't.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Right.
You know? Do I think the guy is a complete garbage human being? Of course. He's murdered people, you know, he's prejudiced, you know, deeply, deeply prejudiced.
And by his own admission.
Yeah, you know, and I'm not gonna like listen to guys spouting, you know, lyrics praising the Third Reich just because they have cool riffs. You know what I mean? I don't know. There's a level of complication there at times where I'm like, I don't know. This is problematic, and problematic is one of those words that people throw around.
Is
a lot.
problematic?
Yeah, but like, I don't know. I understand almost every approach to it. I understand people who are like separate the art from the artist, and I understand people who are like, you know, I don't want to listen to this band. There's 5,000 other bands making really good music that I could listen to.
And that's,
you know?
fair. That's totally fair.
They're all fair arguments, and so I don't have anything counter to say about any of it.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like shrug it off.
Yeah, and I mean, I also
like,
don't want to invite controversy on Serba. I'm like, that's honest. Like, I don't want you. Well, live or die. No one gives a fuck about me.
Well, but the thing is, acknowledging it. You know, in the Brazil episode, Damian was very adamant about acknowledging that Sex Trash writes some pretty gnarly stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I made a comment like, dude, I just want to talk about riffs, which is a dumb thing to say. It really is. You need to acknowledge the stuff. You also need to acknowledge that the world's a complicated place.
Yeah, 100%. And I just didn't want to be, and I said that too, and I think I didn't correct you. Correct's not the right word, but I was like, that's an argument I see online. Is people go, "Oh, I don't give a fuck. I just like the riffs."
Yeah,
and it's like that is not how you feel at all.
No, not at all.
And I didn't want you to be misrepresented.
No, that oversimplifies it too much. I was being dismissive.
Yeah, and me, however, I'm far more willing to accept any of that shit, like, than maybe most people, or maybe like even Serba. Like, I'm willing to like, I don't know, man. Like, in all honesty, and like, don't cancel APL. Like, don't cancel that shit, because it's like I believe in God. You know what I mean? Like, I have faith, and every single metal band almost is in direct opposition to the thing that I believe. And it's like, and if I can let that slide. If I can let, like, the mockery of Jesus Christ, like, if I can let that go, like, why are you going to be up my ass about, like, if some band, like, drunkenly posted a Sig Heil photo, whatever. It's like, first of all, no debate, bad taste, bad decision, brother. Don't do that. You look like a fool. But like, I also am just, I refuse to, I think that people are exactly like Serba said, people are way too complicated. The world is hardly ever black and white. And it's like, yeah, I like Graveland. I think they're cool. And that the only other argument I've ever heard that makes sense is like, yeah, but there's lots of other bands that do that, that aren't that way. And actually, maybe not, because Graveland has a real specific sound that targets those kind of weirdos. But like, you know, there's so much. And like, let me ask you this, like, do you know every band you listen to? Like, and I even see this now pop up on the internet. People are like, I wish I knew a band's stance on trans rights before I listened to them. And I think that, like, it's interesting, and if that's something that matters to you, like I get that you don't want to listen to a band
that hates who you are.
Or not even if you're trans or not, but hates, that has something that you believe in, you know, like, so it's like whether you're trans or not, like, so I mean, it's like, no, I get that, but I just come from a different way of viewing art, and I think that like a majority, if not all of the art that I enjoy is made by severely damaged and fucked up people. And I don't think that much good art comes from happiness. I think it comes from like internal struggle, and it's not pleasant. And like, I don't think that everything in the world is meant to be pleasant. Like, you know, walking the dog, even though this fucker was barking like an asshole, like walking the dog and like going to get a coffee, sitting there enjoying a summer day, like that's meant to be like unencumbered and nice. But like, art is complicated and people are complicated. And like, do I go out and like tacitly endorse bands that have like racist or sexist or misogynistic things? Like, no. But if it comes up, it's not a thing to me that would be like, fuck this band, they're out. And again, the argument would be made, like, you're a straight white male. So like, you don't have that sort of thing. And I always bring up the fact too, that it's like, I'm only half white. Like, I'm as white as Barack Obama and Bob Marley. Like, me and Bob Marley, we're both 50% white. Me and Barack Obama, we're both 50% white. Well, so I grew up in like a different culture, even though I look mostly white or whatever.
You know, there's a
but that doesn't give me an excuse to be anything. But I'm just saying, I've had that leveled at me before, like, oh, you're a straight white man. And it's just like, but you don't know me. See, it reads to the fact that it's like, I'm complicated. I grew up years and years of people giving me fucking dumb looks because I was hanging out with my dark dad and going, dad, and people going like, oh, that's weird. Like, he must be adopted. Yeah. Or like, he must have married the wife or something like that. And I was like, yeah, he did marry the wife. And 3 years later I was born, you dumb bitch.
I think part of it is, you know, a fascination with the capacity of the human character. And I sound like a pretentious asshole.
No, you have to in this conversation.
But there's a, I am so annoyed listening to Varg Vikernes talk, but like, there's a part of me that's fascinated with what he has to say and why and how he got there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a line that I draw there where I'm like, I don't want to give this asshole my time, my page view. You know what I mean? Right. Because that's currency now. You know, and so I discount that. That being said, if he made another metal Bsogm record that was this kind of nature worship thing that a lot of the Bsogm records are, probably give it a good half dozen spins, because
none of the Bsogm records are political or what.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there's a
people take issue. It's personal.
It's a fascination with how one person can be one way here and another way there, and how do they get there, and who are they, and that I think is just being interested in the way things are, and the way people are, and the way in what the human creature is, and how complicated people can be. You know, there's I will say that there are instances where, like, I don't know if I can listen to Michael Jackson the same, you know?
Right.
One of the things I found really fascinating was, I'm a huge Simpsons fan, and Damian's going to shit on me for this, but I'm a huge Simpsons fan. And after, the big Michael Jackson documentaries came out, the producers of The Simpsons pulled the episode out of circulation that Michael Jackson had a guest voice on. And it was Michael Jackson used being on The Simpsons as currency to attract children to him, because that's something that children would find fascinating.
Did he?
About him. Speculatively.
Sure.
And they were like, this doesn't sit right with us.
Sure.
It's not going to show on TV.
Yeah. No, I understand that.
But again, that's not an absolute. That's one example.
That's also a hell of a speculation too.
Yeah, it is. But like, I don't know. But so where it comes from as far as music goes with me, Marduk is an example where it's like where they're slippery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're kind of being purposely slippery. A guy who came into the store the other day was like, I think they're Nazis, and I'm like, I don't know, man. And
yeah.
But
they certainly use that imagery heavily.
But then there's also the idea of representation is not endorsement. You know,
totally.
Just because
I'm with
a journalist writes a story about something horrific that happened in World War II or yesterday doesn't mean there's an endorsement of it. But that's also a weird slippery thing where, like, okay, a journalist has a voice. A journalist for the Washington Post has a voice, and if they keep writing stories about people shooting each other, other people with guns are going to look at that and be inspired to go.
See, I don't know if that's how that tracks.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but you know, when something has a platform that is that big, it can be influential.
I guess,
no matter what it is, whether you're Metallica writing borderline thrashy songs that cross over to large audiences, that's influential.
Yeah.
You know, because the platform is that big. So, I mean...
So, can I ask you a question, Ben? Like, because you're in the age group that's interesting, like the 26-year-old kind of bracket. Like, what I see online is people who kind of stuck their head into the underground were just like, oh, and they're like, this is great. Then they kind of, it's like, you know, when you walk into a house and you're like, oh, this is nice. And then, you know, as you're walking through the house, you're like, this carpet is gross. And like the walls are bad. And like, oh, the faucet's leaky. And you kind of start seeing all the things that are wrong with it. And you have people that are radically trying to change it, which like that absolutely should happen. Like if you don't like the way something is, 100% do something about it. Like start a band, do whatever. But like I see like people that are like, I want death metal, no death.
Yeah.
I want black metal, no black.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that you would say is fair and like you see in like your age group?
I don't know, because I don't necessarily have that many. I don't really follow people on Twitter or those kind of platforms who have that kind of agenda, but also are interested in kind of metal. But it is interesting. It's something I kind of struggle with because, you know, I always considered myself a death metal fan, even though I probably lean a bit towards black metal now. Cannibal Corpse, one of the original bands that sort of got me into that kind of style. And all the death stuff, if people complain about death, I don't really care about that. I mean, it's all sort of fiction. It's all sort of horror movies have been doing it for ages. It's basically the totality of human history is talking about the death of people. But, like, they do have, like, 2 albums that are basically about rape. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm like, hang on, where's the line between, just fictional representations of violence and actual violent sexual ideas? So I don't know, that's one of the things that I sort of am not quite sure about yet.
Yeah, and I hear metal people all the fucking time go like, it's just like a horror movie, man. I'm like, here's my fucking question then. What fucking depraved asshole was like, let's write a movie about someone being raped and murdered, and then like we're gonna get 40 people together to make sure the lighting is just right, and then we're gonna hire people called actors to pretend to be raped, and then we're gonna edit it together in a visually pleasing way. So it's like when people are like, it's just like a horror movie pastiche, I'm like, well, fuck the horror movie too then. Like, you can't have it both. That's when I mean death metal, no death.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I mean. I'm like, people go, oh, well, it's just like, it's just fantasy, or I was just like, well, what the fuck? Like, have you ever killed somebody? Let me ask, Ben, have you ever punched somebody before?
No, I've not.
Okay, I have. It rules. But I've never killed anybody. But I have punched the fuck out of somebody like a couple times. And that is an extreme feeling of power. That, like, you have exerted your will in a physical confrontation, like, and you hurt somebody, and like that is a base level human thing. But then what my mind doesn't understand is like, I had an intense reaction and an interaction with somebody that manifested itself in physical violence, but then I could. And people would probably say, yeah, all physical violence is wrong. I would probably say, you don't know the story, so maybe I was right. Maybe the guy was a Nazi, right? That's what everybody's, punching a Nazi. So why is it okay for people to just write horrible, fucked up stories and make them in movies and comic books? Like, comic books are very dark, too, at times, right?
Yeah,
like, super dark, like, that was what was the deal when I was a kid. Like, comic books are not just Superman. It's like, Spawn is raping the minds of American children. But so that's kind of what I mean. Like, I don't mean to get off on a topic, but like, it's like a lot of people that it is a fantasy to people, and it's like, you've never been in a fight, you've never killed somebody. This is a very heavy topic. Like, the closest I've come to killing somebody is punching someone's lights out, and it was an intense moment. And I think that, like, people take things like murder too lightly. That was my point, is that, like, yeah, it's glorifying murder and blah, blah, and gore and serial killers and stuff like that. And I'm like, that shit's not cool either.
I don't know. The lines keep moving.
That's the
totally,
thing. Totally.
Because it's like, you can write a million songs about murdering Christians, but the one about murdering Jews is the one that's gonna get you persecuted, and I'm not saying either one is right,
Yeah, don't kill Christians, please. But don't do it. Also, don't kill anybody.
Exactly.
But that was okay.
But
go ahead. Oh, okay. I would say okay. So I'll contradict myself because you said the line is moving.
Yeah.
Child molesters.
Yeah.
I have a hard line.
It's just,
if you molest children, you die. That is my opinion. If you harm children physically, a physical abuse of a child, you harm a child physically, whether it's physically or sexually, I don't think you deserve to live.
Well, but I mean, my thing is,
so there you go. I'm anti-death, I'm anti-murder, but it's like when people go, I'm against the death penalty except for in these circumstances. Yeah. I'm like, well, then you're for the death penalty.
Well, I don't know. It's just context.
Yeah.
To contextualize and recontextualize, there's value in that. You know what I mean? I think part of the reason why it's okay to write a zillion songs about killing Christians is because that is it's an okay rebellious point of view, because there are so many Christians and Christians have power.
Yeah.
That's
I guess. I mean,
well, in our society.
Yeah, but I mean, then,
so
yeah.
I don't know. So my question for you, Ben, how weird is it that the guy in your favorite band, Agalok, made some controversial statements? You know, I mean, what do you do? You sit there and you go, shit. One of the guys I admire might not be the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah, I know. This is something I've been thinking about for ages. I mean, Bsogm, I think, is the classic example because of, possibly one of the more influential people in kind of that's black metal. And he's like a really bad guy, and he's not just like a bad guy. He has some personal opinions, but openly expresses those opinions. And I don't know. That's kind of why I asked. I want your opinion on it because it seems to me one of those problems which is very difficult to find a really clean solution to.
But Varg didn't act on the problems that everyone has with him. Everyone hates that he's a racist, bigoted, whatever. It's like the crime that he committed, he killed a fellow white Norwegian dude. Do you know what I mean? It's like he didn't fucking kill a Muslim guy.
He destroyed priceless artifacts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like so
he took things off the earth that can never be replaced.
Totally. Yeah. He destroyed a dominant force in the culture, obviously. So, what do you think about the Agalok dude? He made some kind of out-of-pocket comment that was anti-Semitic, right?
Honestly, this is news to me. I haven't seen it.
Oh, fuck. Never mind.
Out of genuine interest, when did it happen?
Oh,
God. It was a few weeks ago. He
really? Jeez.
Yeah, it was.
News travel slow down to Australia, damn.
It was.
I'll have to get rid of those vinyls then, I guess.
Yeah, no, dude, let me know. DM me, I'll buy them from you. I have no problem owning them.
Well, he made a couple of stereotypical kind of anti-Semitic comments.
He said
in the comment section of a Facebook post.
Yeah, he referred to Facebook. Please, okay, all the shit I say could be taken out of context. I forget but he said exactly. Juden book.
Yeah.
So he said Juden being the German word for Jewish.
Yeah.
You make your own connection there.
So it's a charged.
So it's a charged statement. He was like, "Oh yeah, I guess that wouldn't work on Juden book," and it's so people were just like, "Fuck Agalok," burning the records and shit like that, and throwing them away, and it's that's kind of what drives me crazy about all this stuff. And it's I understand that if you're
and his bandmates in his new band are we don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, and his
band's over. The band's over.
Yeah, also his bandmates have been in they've been pretty shitty about the whole breakup thing, and they looked extra petty.
No, his current bandmates, whatever.
Pilorian, that's true.
That band's done.
His current bandmates.
They're like, no, we don't want to do it. We don't want anything to do with this guy.
Yeah, the Pilorian guys were just like, ooh, yeah, sorry, we got to move on, because they probably want to have careers that last, longer than John Helm or whatever. But I think when people have that gut reaction, I understand that if somebody said something that is offensive to you and it shocks you and it hurts your feelings, I understand not wanting to listen to that.
Or to push back in some way.
Push back in some way. What I don't like is the way that the culture operates now, that they're like, Michael Jackson isn't even that good.
Well,
or Michael Jackson's not even that good. It's no, he was a fucking genius. He committed horrible crimes, most likely. Although we got to remember, this motherfucker beat the charges. So did R. Kelly once.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's
in a different time.
In a different time, and then it's okay. So then if you say, well, it doesn't matter that you broke the charge, you beat the charges, I'm not going to accept the results. It's oh, well, then you sound like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Who's if I lose the election, I won't accept the results.
So what happens is, say John Helm comes out and is contrite, hey, I said a dumb thing, I have things to work on.
I also think it was a private message and someone screenshotted him.
No, it wasn't private.
Oh, okay.
It might have been on a private
Facebook or something like that.
Page.
The point is somebody snitched on him.
Well, and
I'm anti-snitches.
But it just gets into this thing where people make mistakes and can learn from them. they're contrite, they can change as human beings. Just like, I once threw snowballs at the girl next door when she wasn't looking. It was a very mean thing. And I learned that I shouldn't do that because I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are lessons to be learned in making mistakes like that. And I think people are human and they're gonna do dumb shit or even think and believe dumb shit.
Yeah.
That they're not going to believe after they learn something new in 20 minutes or in 2 years or whatever. And there's a point where, all this kind of, all this stuff is going to test what people believe about, the idea of rehabilitation, because, especially like let's take Norway as an example. A society that obviously believes in rehabilitation because their most brutal murderer won't go to jail for more than 18 years or whatever the limit is, or 21 years or whatever it is.
21 was for murder and arson.
Yeah.
If you murder someone, I think it's like 10.
Yeah. So like there's got to be, there's going to be some push and pull with those kind of things.
Does that change? Like having heard that about John Helm and not knowing the full story, other than I think he just made what everyone will agree to is just an out-of-pocket comment. Like, does that change how you feel about Agalloch?
I don't know, probably not, but like it's interesting because Agalloch's sort of a band which is gone and it's kind of like set in stone, whereas other bands, if they're ongoing, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just I don't know how to feel about it. No, it's something I've been thinking about for ages, and I still don't really know how to feel about all these kind of things.
Well, that's sort of what getting around to the base of the question is like, why do I kind of shrug around it? Because there's a lot of ammunition to be shot in 1,000 different directions, and what good is it going to do? I mean, this conversation is a good one to have.
Yeah, I think it's important.
When it comes right down, not just for the sake of interesting podcast fodder, but like as human beings, this is a conversation that's a good one to have. Yeah. To acknowledge that this stuff.
I, for one, applaud you
that there's this type of conflict happening in our world.
Because there are people that I know, and there are people I think who, the minute they found that out, they would Google it, confirm that it was true, and that would change how they feel about Agalloch and whatever. And it's like I said, if that's how you feel, like I don't begrudge you that in one bit. But like I do respect you for like even thinking or saying like, like it doesn't affect the fact that the guy made great art. It's like it might affect the fact that you're like, maybe the next time like he puts a project out, I might be like, nah. Yeah, I don't want to support that. Or you didn't make a split-second decision. You didn't cancel Agalloch. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Too late. So they were cancelled.
You're right.
Thought needs to be put into everything. Yeah, not just reaction.
I have no thoughts ever. It's a miracle.
I don't know. You just exhibited a whole shit pile of them, man.
I made all that shit up. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
When do you guys start getting into heavy music, and what appealed to you about it?
I
don't know. That's a
great answer.
That's what appealed to me about it. I mean, it's a gateway drug kind of thing because, when I was 10 years old or whatever, the huge shit was hair metal. It was Rat and Motley Crue and Cinderella and all that stuff. And that was what was popular. So that's what you're hearing a lot. And it's accessible and you're buying into it, right? And I think to a degree it's human nature to be like, hey, this stuff with heavy guitars, what's other stuff that has heavy guitars? Yeah. You start listening to other stuff. And then, like, I remember I had a skater friend who sat me down and he's like, pop, hits play on Master of Puppets. And I'm like, when are they going to start singing? because it's just this big, long instrumental intro. And that was one of the things where all of a sudden, you know, pop art became art in my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where all of a sudden this like whole new avenue of ambition and expression opened up. You know, and so why did that appeal to me instead of I don't know, John Coltrane? There's still that kind of youthful energy to it, a rebellious thing, you know, the cool aesthetic of, you know, of metal.
Yeah.
You look at Iron Maiden covers, and it's like that's not too far a leap from Star Wars and Godzilla movies that I cut my teeth watching as a kid, you know. So I've since, you know, intellectualized it to the point where it's like, okay, you know, I'm a mild-mannered guy who likes really aggressive music, and some people find that really strange.
Yeah. and some people assume that you have like a dark side because of it.
Yeah. Well, but like, doesn't everybody have a little bit of that in them? A little bit of a dark side? I would say so.
I don't think you have a particularly dark side to you.
No, I mean, have I squashed impulses to punch people? Yeah. That's a dark impulse. Okay. That's an animal impulse. I think everybody has that. So like, I've since come to intellectualize it where like, there's an element of escape. There's an element of fantasy. There's an element of gut level, physical, you know, animal reaction to a good riff, but then I can listen to the same riff and go, oh, listen to that change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a weird chord that's in there. Oh, that's so cool. How'd they come up with that? You know, what went into it? And there's you know, there's a really good balance to metal to me that is, you know, both head and heart.
Yeah.
Being
dick and balls.
Yeah, dick and balls. Yeah. Each one being stroked.
Yeah.
And then some bands do one of those things in an amazing way.
Right.
You know, it's just that's the Brazilian thrash stuff. It's just the raw animal stuff.
That's just taint.
It's just all taint. But then like,
do you know what? Ben, you know taint is that is that a U.S. thing?
Well, I consume a lot of US culture, so I'm not sure if I know it because of that or if it's something in Australia.
Taint is the part between the asshole and the balls.
It is indeed.
Yes.
So, sorry, we don't mean to like talk down. We're just making sure you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But but then like I can really sink my teeth into, you know, a Dark Angel or Opeth song that has a bunch of movements and riffs that are, and it's absolutely an intellectual exercise.
Right.
I mean, Dark Angel has a primal thing coursing beneath it, you know.
Sure.
Opeth more so high-minded, high concept, artsy, whatever. So you know, that's what it's evolved into for me.
Cool, long answer. Let me give my 2-second answer, which was that I grew up in a nice, happy, normal, upper middle class home, I think. Weirdness being like, the biracial home. But I had no real reason to be drawn to like heavy and aggressive music other than the fact that like it was anti-authoritarian. And I've always like hated authority figures, and like I've always been strong-willed. And so it was the first thing that I ever saw that echoed that. Like, it was loud, distorted guitar. I was like, whoa, that's cool. And, like, the people that liked it were like, fuck teachers, and, like, fuck the cops, and, like, fuck your parents. I'm like, oh, I kind of like my parents. I was like, I think school is actually kind of cool because I, like, learn stuff. I do think that all cops are bastards and should die. So, I lock into that. Fuck a cop. Punch a Nazi, punch a cop. So Yeah, I got into it because it was anti-authoritarian and it was aggressive, and I was like an aggressive young man. I wasn't like an unhappy boy, but I was a testosterone laden like boy who liked and like, yeah, I liked the imagery. I thought it was cool. It was way cooler than like somebody, staring at their shoes playing like some like lovelorn song is like fine, but like also some guy behind a wall of Marshall or in front of a wall of like Marshall amps bashing a chord that makes hundreds of people mosh into each other. That seemed more appealing to me. So I mean, it was simple, and then of course my weird personality got involved, and now here we are.
One thing which sort of, this is going back a little bit, that I didn't experience was a thing like the Headbangers Ball. You've mentioned this a couple of times about how it's kind of really introduced you to some bands. It was kind of an important, cultural phenomenon, at least within, heavy metal. Talk a little bit about that and its importance.
Well, that was the water cooler, I mean, everything's scattered now. You've got you have 1,000 Headbangers Balls on the internet.
Think of Headbangers Ball as the Fuck Jerry of its day. Did that reference fall blank on everybody?
Yeah. Okay.
Fuck Jerry.
Edit that one out, Ben.
No, don't edit it out. Maybe look like a dumbass. I don't care. No. Fuck Jerry is the Instagram, the biggest Instagram meme aggregator. So like all the cultural references, all the jokes that are like made on every late night talk show, they come from there. So like Headbangers Ball was like the cultural aggregate.
Well, it was a narrow pipeline.
Yeah.
And
I had that too, but it was just called 120 minutes.
Yeah, so it was like Headbangers Ball. It was 2 hours every Saturday.
It was 120 minutes.
Yeah. And and that was like where, oh my gosh, they're going to show a Sepultura video. I'm going to see what these guys look like.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I can see these people, these guys who make this music I love. I can see them move. They're not just a static thing in a magazine somewhere,
Yeah.
So there was that.
A very cool thing pre-YouTube.
Yeah.
And now everyone just like is looking up everything.
And that kind of started out as like a bunch of, they'd mix in the hair metal with, some of the heavier stuff. But Headbangers Ball, Metallica went years refusing to make a music video, and when they finally made one for one, that's where it premiered. It was 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, and I remember it clear as day. It was so monumental,
Right.
That was the power that MTV in general had, one of the other, but even then, did the one video get played that much during the day? Probably not. It's 9 minutes long. It's super depressing. It's black and white. The music is really, really heavy,
It's from their least sonically accessible record.
But a huge record at the time.
Right.
And that wasn't even a factor. Wasn't even part of the discussion that I was having at the time anyway. And so, like, that was a component, and there was another syndicated radio show in the U.S. Based out of Dallas called Z-Rock, and they listened to that a fair amount too. But like, I think it was Friday nights. They had an hour or 2 hours where they would just play the heaviest stuff they had, and that's where I first heard like Death.
Yeah,
and in some of those, in Obituary, and some of those real early American death metal bands, and it's like, here's the new one by Creator, and I remember hearing Slaughter, the Canadian Slaughter, on that show.
Not Up All Night, Sleep All Day, Slaughter.
Yeah, exactly. Those were the like. For a kid at the time, for a 14-year-old at the time, that those were like the watering holes you went to. Whereas now it's like
YouTube.
You're at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, and like you're at the mercy of like you. But I honestly believe it's YouTube, because you discover one thing, whatever that thing is, you type it into YouTube to check it out, and there's a fucking algorithm that's like, okay, these people that watch this or listen to this will listen to that. And then it's like, dude, I've discovered like cool bands that way.
Yeah.
Where just I open up YouTube and it's like, what's this video? I'm like, what the fuck is that? And I click it.
Yeah, and then
some
it leads
algorithm
to the next thing, and you're down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I'm down the rabbit hole. And it's funny, Serba brought up something, the whole Headbangers Ball thing, and I had forgotten 100%, because, as we said, my memory's not so good, that like when I was a kid, Headbangers Ball had been canceled because it was like dinosaur rock at the time. It was so uncool.
Yeah.
But in the late 90s, when like alternative culture was like at a peak, meaning like alternative culture was the dominant culture, which is like what I grew up in. It's very funny to think that like the mainstream culture was selling you the fact that they weren't mainstream culture, but it's kind of true that 120 or Headbangers Ball rebranded itself as 120 Minutes.
Well, 120 Minutes had existed prior to that, you know.
No, I don't know that. But
yes, it was a Sunday night show, and that's where you could go to see Pixies,
right?
REM
indie
videos.
Stuff.
Yeah.
That. But I remember it being specifically like rebranded to like heavy stuff though too. Because I remember seeing a Biohazard video on there. Because when I was like going through and like looking up like Biohazard videos, I remember like, oh fuck, I saw this on 120 Minutes.
Yeah.
So they kind of had a little of that. So like it was not as culturally relevant as when Serba was there, but like I definitely remember seeing things and discovering bands like, especially a lot of like Southern California like punk bands and stuff like that would be like No Doubt would have the video on 120 Minutes or whatever. Yeah. Like sounds funny now because they're like they played a fucking Super Bowl, but like they were at one point, you know, a ska punk band from Orange County that, you know, didn't have that many fans.
Now, Serba, you mentioned playing some Iron Maiden with your son. Obviously, he's quite young, sort of in age, maybe where he doesn't quite appreciate it. How are you going to approach something that's a really important part of your life as he grows older and begins to develop his own sort of musical appreciation?
Oh, I plan to to utterly brainwash him so he doesn't know any other world.
I think that's a cool move. I think that's a cool move, to be honest.
I mean, I don't know. That's kind of my flippant answer. I don't have a good answer for that. But like,
you're not lying though. Like he's telling the truth.
I remember a couple years ago, and my kid wasn't even 2 yet, right? And I'm a huge Star Wars guy, Ben. Like I have
fucking dork.
that like some of my earliest memories are of watching Star Wars. So, and I have a basement full of Star Wars toys
also
that I've saved. So, and I have a friend who's a similar fan, and he came over and he's like, "So have you shown Star Wars to your kid yet?" I'm like, "I don't know. He's kind of young." And he's like, "My son has not known a world without Star Wars in it. Like, there won't be a time. He will not remember his first time he saw Star Wars. That's how early it was."
Yeah,
I immediately, like a few days later, I popped in Star Wars, and like you turn on the phone, and you hit video and record, and the fanfare comes up, and he went, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
So
So just imagine that, but with like the first 6 Bathory records. So as soon as you hear the tape hiss on Bathory 1 on the intro, and then when it goes into war, that's there's a reaction he's going to have. Whoa! Well, war is later on the record, but you know what I'm saying.
So I don't know. I mean, he's going to hear it. He's going to be around it. He looks at the shirt I'm wearing and goes, heavy metal, rawr, And the other day, like out of absolute nowhere,
apropos of nothing,
he said, heavy metal is rock and roll with thunder, lightning, and monsters. He's 4. He's 4.
Damn.
And I went, dude.
You're a smart little
Mr.
bitch.
Soundbite.
Yeah. Smart. You should get him a Twitter account.
So, yeah, I don't know. You can't force your kids to like the same things you do. But I do think back on some of the stuff that music-wise that my dad listened to, and I'm like, Roy Orbison's a badass. Johnny Cash is a badass.
Yeah.
Ronnie Millsap, I don't know about that.
Yeah. See, one thing too, like to answer like the previous question too, I kind of forgotten about was that my dad was huge into progressive rock. He loved like ELP is his favorite band of all time. So part of the reason that I liked punk rock and heavy metal and hardcore was that it was the opposite of prog rock.
Mm-hmm.
It was regressive. Like my dad would hear the Stooges and be like, "These guys can't play."
Yeah.
Like they're all out of tune.
My dad would listen to And Justice for All and go, "That's just a bunch of noise." And I'm like, "Dad, that's like 400 more chords than that country band than the Judds."
Right. And like my dad
and just blink, blink, blink.
Yeah, like my dad would appreciate, because I remember trying to show him like some metal stuff, and he'd be like, "That's cool, but like I wish it was on like a B3 or something like that, like a Hammond B3 organ, and had a it's just funny." But sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on your question about child rearing.
Damian, you mentioned hardcore. That's sort of something that's always tangential to a lot of the stuff you talk on Bsogm, but obviously because it's not Bsogm, it doesn't come up necessarily that much. Talk a little bit about that and how, I don't know, it sort of contrasts or is the same as your love of heavy metal.
Hang on a second. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Serba just jumped out the window. He threatens to punch me in the face every time I talk about hardcore. No, hardcore is 100% as important to me as heavy metal. I could do this show about hardcore. So, like I don't watch movies. I don't watch TV. I don't read as much as I should.
I read more than I do.
Yeah, I do, but I wish I read more. Because then I would be big smart. But I read. And that sounds pretentious and stupid as fuck, but it's like the truth. I don't go see movies. I hate movies. Like, I have dedicated what little of my brain I have to like music. Like, that's my thing. And like guitar gear. Mm-hmm. And a little bit for football.
You watch football on television.
Watch football on television, yeah.
And boxing.
I watch boxing. I watch football and I watch boxing. So, but I don't watch Games of the Thrones or, whatever, like.
He's seen Deadwood a zillion times.
Yeah. I was like my mom watches Arrested Development and she's like, "You should watch Arrested Development." I'm like, "No, because it's stupid."
So to the point.
Shut up, bitch. Let me get there.
Hardcore. Okay, can I say something about
I answered
hardcore?
his question. It's the most. It's as important as it is, and the level of dedication that I have to Bsogm, I also have to hardcore.
My thing is like,
this is not your question, but go ahead.
But you
jump back out the window.
I like a good running joke about how hardcore just grates on me.
Yeah,
and it doesn't always.
Yeah,
it's the tough guy hardcore that drives me nuts.
Yeah, the hate breed
type hardcore just drives me crazy. It's that like self-righteous, like overly sincere to the point where you wonder if it really is sincere. That kind of
it's
stuff.
Definitely sincere.
I don't know, man.
They're not smart enough to pull off anything else.
But they're
not saying anything about Jamie Johnson.
But it's contrived.
I don't know. You're.
I don't know. It's
these are things that if I said about a metal band, you'd be like, "You don't fucking know that. You're being an ass."
No,
you're being an assumptive prick.
I'm not saying that, but like,
oh, you're trying to say that like Bonded by blood has more like heart behind it than like satisfaction and the death of desire. But
I'm just trying to say that the guy who's like, he's singing about a different subject matter is just as contrived.
Yeah.
But like the sincerity can be contrived just as much.
Sure,
as,
the delivery
as the like silly, dumb metal.
Yeah, but like you see sincerity represented in hardcore as like a guy up there in street clothes, like speaking to the crowd, and like the band is in street clothes, and they're like presenting their message, and the message is sincerity, and you think that sincerity is contrived, but then like a metal band gets up there and they're like denim and leather and they're fucking spikes on the wrist, and you're like, no, that's a more honest message.
I'm not saying it's more honest. I'm just saying, like,
you don't need to be a part of this argument. We're moving on. I apologize.
What I'm saying is there's a level of contrivance to everything.
I love hardcore.
They're trying so hard not to be contrived.
I love hardcore.
Trying not to be contrived is in itself contrived.
Shut the fuck up. I love hardcore so much. I play in a hardcore band.
Yeah.
A lot of my bands don't play live because they're just me, like the metal bands. But my hardcore bands have always played live, so I've always had a spot in my heart for hardcore. I think that hardcore is the best live music on the planet. The interaction between the bands and the people out on the floor, and hardcore ruined a lot of good music for me because it's just such high energy, good stuff, and it's aggressive and it's short and it's to the point.
I understand short to the point, get in, get out, leave a smoking crater. I understand that. But one thing I want to say, like, so much of it is so humorless. And black metal is the same way.
Yeah.
But sometimes Tak doesn't realize how fucking funny he really is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nothing funny about Jamie Josta.
No, but I mean, no, whatever. Do you like hardcore, Ben?
Not particularly, to be honest. I'm actually doing a hardcore band on Monday, but it's not. I suppose maybe it's because a lot of the scene in Melbourne is like metalcore, and so I tend to associate with that, not the sort of proper true.
Is it like Parkway Drive?
Yeah,
it's like a big band.
Parkway Drive has basically changed like the scene over here. Like I wasn't necessarily aware of it before, but like there are so many bands that have wanted to be Parkway Drive ever since. So it's particularly up in New South Wales, the sort of state above mine. Yeah, it had incredible influence on a lot of the music that sort of comes out of that sort of particular facet of heavy music.
And there's like a lot of Dispute's big in Australia too, right? You know La Dispute?
I think I've heard the name, but I don't know. I'm not really involved in the scene, so maybe it is, and I'm not aware of it.
Sure. They're just a band from the area that I think they did really, really well in Australia. So much so that their drummer married an Australian girl and lives there now. So he's one of you now. I was just curious. Like they're a little more like emo centric, so pretty far off the. But I was just curious. As an Australian guy, if you heard of La Dispute. But yeah, hardcore, the answer is just as important to me as all the other stuff. I could be talking about Sick of It All just as much as I talk about Overkill.
Yeah.
Now, this is another thing that I know Serba loves hearing about. Your bands, Damian. You want to talk about?
Hell yeah.
So this is actually something I might want to talk to you on another occasion about if
sure.
When you're
that's a whole other 6-hour podcast.
Yeah. But just briefly talk a little bit about some of the bands you're involved.
He's flipping me off right now.
What was your question, sir? I had a jackass in my ear.
If they weren't good, they wouldn't be worth talking about.
This is true. What was your question, sir?
Talk a little bit about some of the bands you're involved with.
The main band. Okay. The podcast, I struggled to do. One of the main reasons I didn't want to do the podcast because I didn't want to. I almost said expose myself. I don't want to expose myself, but I didn't want to expose myself to people and like let them see how I interact with one of my best friends in the world, Serba. Like, because when the mics are on, it isn't a show. It's like, it's really how we talk to each other. Like, so my bands, I take super, super seriously. My music is very humorless. You know what I mean? Like, it's not jokey.
No,
I take it very seriously. I'm very pretentious about it.
So, you know what? I think I would answer this question better than you would.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Seriously. So,
you'll get a shorter answer.
You don't want to define what you do, really. I mean, there's elements of it where, you know, Axamite is your metal punk band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's, like, dude, Axamite sounds like it can go from Bathory to Voivod.
Yeah.
From one riff to the next.
Destruction.
Yeah.
To Minor Threat.
So I think that's my favorite of Damian's bands. It's, you know, lo-fi and aggressive. You've got Ornamental Headpiece and
there's a lot. I run a label called Colloquial Sound Recordings. It's a stupid fucking name.
No, it's okay.
I thought it was going to last, like, and then it didn't end up being a thing. But A Pregnant Light is the main band.
Well, and that's why I'm building up to that, because
I do like Vestal Virgin and The Station of Life, and
it ranges from more metal to more hardcore to more punk to, you know, doom to,
you know, one of my
keyboard-driven black metal.
Yeah, you know what one of my best-selling records is? Like, as far as, like, Unisoul,
the Alluring
thing.
The Alluring thing, which is a Funeral Doom tape. But it all, like, kind of comes into one. Like, you can see the influences blending into a very hearty stew with A Pregnant Light.
Yeah.
That's like the distillation of all your influences into one thing. Starting with hardcore metal, black metal, hip hop, Madonna, you know, all that kind of
pop
stuff.
Music.
Everything you like, kind of
indie rock. You know, we're talking about like Smiths, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're a big Johnny Marr guy.
Big Johnny Marr guy. And, you know, as evidenced by the fact, too, that, like, I keep things private and secret. It's like, I've been working on, like, a new record, and Serba hasn't heard a fucking note of it.
You played a smidgen.
I played a smidgen because it's very thrashy.
Yeah, you played, like, 15 seconds of it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's sitting behind the test press for the vinyl. I could, you know, whatever. But,
where's my bag? I'm going to put it in there.
Yeah. So, we'll talk about it at a later time, but I guess for the listeners, check out A Pregnant Light, check out Colloquial Sound Recordings, check out Axamite.
Axamite, I love Axamite.
Yeah, Axamite's the shit. But A Pregnant Light is like my life's work. Like, when I die, that's kind of how I want to be remembered. And my hardcore band is Prison Suicide.
Prison Suicide.
Yeah.
To talk about briefly some of your outside interests, Serba, briefly talk about your involvement in sort of journalism and film. I know it's kind of compressing something into a little soundbite, but talk a little bit about that.
So the funniest thing is, I was making a living as a movie critic for 12 years out of the 20 some that I worked for a newspaper and a digital news media company. And people would always come up to me, knowing that I'm a metalhead and a movie critic, and they'd be like, they'd want to talk about horror movies, and I was just like, I don't even like horror movies. That was just a terrible contradiction in the minds of so many people. I've come around to them, put it that way. But like, I'm not, people have a picture of these like metalhead dudes, these death metal guys who have, you know, dingy apartments with 600 VHS tapes of every shitty slasher movie ever, and you've watched them all a dozen times. And that's just like, people jump to that conclusion. They're like, what do you think of Friday the 13th Part 8? Dude, I haven't even fucking bothered to watch that, you know? So that's one of the funnier things about me. I don't know. I worked at the school paper in college. I've never taken a journalism course, but I've worked in the field. I always wanted to be a movie critic, and I became one for a while. I still kind of am one on a freelance basis.
Where could people read some of your recent stuff?
JohnSerba@large.com.
Okay, just checking.
And I have bylines at decider.com.
Oh, okay.
Where I've been doing a lot of kind of
I'm not afraid to get the plug
Netflix and streaming movies and TV type commentary.
Stream it or skip it.
Stream it or skip it. You actually saw that? Are you Googling it right now?
No. No. If I'm being honest, I was looking around last night just to get a feel for some of your work.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. So, I mean, eventually, I have a couple books in me, I think, eventually.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a film book brewing in my brain, and I wanna write like. I really like Martin Popoff, who's the Canadian metal journalist. He's probably the only one of like 3 metal journalists in the world who makes a living doing that. And he's done these like compendiums of reviews of albums, and I would love to do something like that. But even like focus, maybe it's the Bsogm book.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the bullshit.
I would like it to be so I can get in on some of that money.
There is no money in that, dude.
Yeah, well,
it'd be a labor of love, and I need the money more than the labor at this point.
So this is something too I've kind of been pestering Serba about. Is I told him that I would help him, and by like help him, I could help him with this project as much as he helps me with the podcast, which is to say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I what at all, I don't know, help. I would love to at one point write a biography with Mark Kozilek from Sun Kill Moon and Red House Painters. And I think Serba, because his story is so interesting and I think no one will do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do it. I think Serba should do it with Dave Windorf from Monster Magazine.
Yeah, I should. I really should.
So like every time I bring it up,
every time
he brings it up, he's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like if you don't do it, no one will.
I know.
You know? So I think maybe putting it out in the world publicly, someone will be like, hey, let's read that Windorf book.
So there's this time about 6.5 years ago, I went to Indiana University to see Werner Herzog. Do you know who Werner Herzog is?
Yeah, I'm aware of him briefly, but I think he's one of the people who actually need to kind of get into film more seriously and actually take a look at.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of have to be a film nerd. Although, you know, he's been kind of memed a little bit. You know, he's said some really kind of crazy, awesome, weird things that are kind of made him internet famous. But like he's a kind of a nihilist at times, and his films are absolutely fascinating to me. And he has this kind of grim persona. And I went to see him speak and present films at Indiana University, and I had an opportunity to meet him through wildly ridiculous, convoluted circumstances. And it happened to be my birthday. And so Werner Herzog, I met him and he's like, oh, you are from Michigan? I'm like, yeah, I'm from Michigan. You know, this is my little birthday present to myself, is this little trip. When is your birthday? It's today. I need to give you a hug. And Werner Herzog gave me a hug. Yeah. I am convinced that Werner Herzog doesn't just hug anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm one of the chosen few.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's my favorite story.
He's the only person. You love that story. He's like the only person I've ever met. Not that I've met, but or like in doing research, because this motherfucker doesn't shut up about Herzog. he's like the only guy who has a Herzog story that isn't like, I wanted to press charges at like the end of it, you know? And similarly, I have a Kozilek story that like I talked to Mark Kozilek and we had a pleasant conversation.
He suffered you.
We had
no fools.
Yeah, we had a pleasant conversation, and everyone's just like, "You had a pleasant conversation with Mark Kozilek?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was brief," and I was just like, he asked me a couple questions as I was walking away, like with my buddy. We're like, "Oh shit," because we were both like, "We gotta get the fuck out of here while we're playing, you know, we're still good." And then it was just like, "Cool, man, like, dude, like, we'll have a good time." And then so you've got a good Herzog story, you know that not many people have because he's a prickly weird fucker, as is Kozilek. But
he's actually a very kind, soft-spoken guy who, you know, has sort of a persona, whether he wants it or not.
Oh, he wants it.
Oh, yeah, to a degree, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, well, I've got you here. I thought I might ask you this question because it's just been I've been doing interviews for going back about 5 years now.
You were in radio, right?
Yeah, I was in radio. Yeah, and did sort of interviews with that. And something I think more and more I think about like what I'm actually trying to do when I interview people. I was wondering about your thoughts about that. What's because you've done a bunch.
Yeah.
How do you do an interview? Like, what are you trying to get out of it? What's the right approach? What are your thoughts on that?
I was never that good at it. I'll be honest. You know,
nice.
Seriously, I mean, I did it a lot, and I don't think I was that great at it. But I was better at writing these kind of, you know, analytical things. But the thing I learned is just to realize that the person on the other end is a human being and have a conversation, you know. Sometimes they're willing and sometimes they're not. I mean, there are times when like...
This is good. This is a great conversation, by the way.
Yeah,
like, I love this.
Yeah. Well, mainly because Ben is quiet and he just lets us ramble on. It's amazing.
I feel guilty. It's like this motherfucker has made like 3 pots of coffee and like he's been like checking his mail.
Yeah. But you know, you can bring up the Detroit Lions to Alice Cooper and he'll be like, "Oh yeah," because he's a fan. Yeah. You know, and you try to bring up the Detroit Lions quarterback to Jason Aldean because he's from Georgia, and it's just like, are we just going to talk about the album? Not, he didn't say that, but you know, he's kind of redirecting it. So some people are just want to play that game and talk about and hit the talking points they want to. And other people, like the best interviews I've had had very few questions asked at all in them, you know. Obviously you have to get things started with one, and hopefully you can just continue like we're doing right now, kind of. Yeah.
I think you're doing great. I mean, like, you didn't ask me, but I've been interviewed dozens and dozens of times for the label and all the bands and stuff, and A Pregnant Light was, what would you say, about 5 years ago, somewhat famous, internet famous for my interviews? I said some pretty out-of-pocket things in my interviews. Not out-of-pocket, but just like, was saying shit that nobody else...
Yeah.
I was just being me, I guess. So you're doing a very good job. I think you're asking cool questions.
Yeah, I was reading one of those the same time I was going through some of Serba's writings, and I think you called them, or at least you called their question moronic.
Oh, did I call a question moronic?
I think so. It was a little slightly difficult to tell from the context, but that seems to be the implication.
Oh, did I insulted the interviewer?
I don't know. I don't know. I think they were. It's difficult to tell over text whether they were offended or not, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of times, like, if I'm doing, like, interviewing, like, a European guy, I can get away with a lot more. Or, like, a European guy's interviewing me, I can get away with a lot more. But, here's a kind of funny, interesting story about Tone. There's a dude, I mean, I don't know if I want to, like, say his name. No, I don't really care. His name was John Rosenthal. He worked for Invisible Oranges for a spell, and He worked for, now I think he's working for Decibel at some point, maybe. So he was a huge fan. He collected all my early stuff, all my really rare out of print tapes. And we were having a conversation like you and I are having. Like, we were just like bullshitting. And I think I actually met him once, actually. It was totally fine. And we were conducting an email interview. And I said something, and the tone, he read it 100% wrong. Or I said something, I'm like, that's a dumbass, like blah, 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 thinking that we were going to move on to the next topic or whatever. He started like an internet fatwa against me, like demanding that like everybody hate me and like sucks, all my stuff sucks. And it's actually funny because the guy who alerted me to this was actually a guy from Tasmania. In your neck of the woods, was like, what did you like fuck this guy's wife or something? Like, what did you do like to make him so mad? I was like, I didn't do anything. We were doing an interview and then it just stopped. And so like, I kind of learned my little bit of a lesson there. And it was like, well, I bought all your old tapes off him and, and I was just like, and like every time I put out like a record or something like that, he's got like something bad to say about it. So he's like a little bit of a hater out there. And like, I've always just let it fly. Like, because I don't want to be, I think like, I don't want to be the guy that like, it's like, but also he was the example of, I said something to him and then he could no longer appreciate my art. Do you know what I mean? Like we were talking about earlier, like, I don't want to like, hey, if I hurt his feelings, like it certainly wasn't on purpose, but also like, yo, homeboy, like if you got hurt feelings and you're in your feelings about it, I'm going to let you be in your feelings about it. Like, I'm not going to like try to convince you otherwise. Like you misread something. I think you misread something. I don't think I was genuinely being rude or hurtful, but I don't know. Maybe I was. I don't really remember, but don't be mad at me, Ben. I like you. I think you're a nice guy.
No, it's fine. It's funny. People, I think, especially with musicians who are doing a lot of interviews, I think interviewers really need to kind of be aware of that and have a little bit, let some stuff roll off their back a bit.
Yeah, and like engage in the conversation, like, and understand that like I don't need to like just acquiesce to every little fucking dumbass thing you say. Sorry, see, this is why I shouldn't. See, if we had like, what if I was adding the pod, I would like edit that shit out.
Well, I mean, it's all about doing the research, and so you're not asking the same question and writing the same story.
Yeah, and I think that was the genesis of when you going, boring fucking question, dude.
Yeah.
Was it's like, dude, I've done this. I've answered that question.
What are your influences? What are your goals as a musician? And that
like,
kind of
and
stuff.
the question that a pregnant light gets all the time, and I don't mind answering it, is like, well, how do you describe how did you figure out how to sound like that? Because a pregnant light, I sounds like I'm trying to big dick myself here and like make myself, but it doesn't sound like anything else. It's, for better or worse, actually unique. I didn't want it to be unique, but that's how it turned out. Because it's just me, and it's my artistic thing. And I think people just like, I just ask that question over and over again, and it's worth asking. Maybe that was not the question, but I don't remember. It's beside the point. I made him mad. That was the point. And then he got big mad at me on the internet. So that's okay. John Rosenthal, if you're listening, you little crybaby bitch. I forgive you. I forgive you. I'm the big man.
It's funny. I've sort of almost resolved to not talk to some of the bigger bands, just because I find it's difficult to find avenues that haven't been explored. But when you're interviewing about the album, you have to ask them about the album, but then their responses are rote. So I don't know, that's why I try to interview more bands which haven't been interviewed. I feel like I'm actually documenting something interesting. Yeah,
I loved your Anal Nathrock interview. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was thinking about, like, should I do it? Should I not do it? But I felt like, and maybe I'm just imagining, but I felt like I actually did ask some questions which perhaps illuminated things which I don't know have been illuminated before. I don't know. I didn't read all of these interviews, but I've got one last question for you guys.
Sure.
What have you been listening to, watching, or reading lately? I know the watching probably doesn't apply to Damian, but regardless.
Yeah.
Especially with football season over.
Yeah, with football. I just watch boxing and football. That's about it.
Well, you're going to watch The Dirt. You're going to watch the Motley Crue movie.
Yeah, I watched. I lost a bunch of money. Mikey Garcia went up a few weight classes to fight Errol Spence Jr. at welterweight. I watched that and I lost $60. I placed a $60 bet, which I lost. So that was what I was watching. When I was reading, currently reading. No, well, I'm going to keep that. I read that Swans book recently. That was really good.
You need to let me borrow that.
No, bitch.
Okay.
You can buy your own copy. You can borrow it. That Swans book was really cool. That's kind of what I want to do with Kozilek, is like a oral history thing. I'm saying this now because I've never said it out loud before, but like I want like to go with Mark Kozilek to places and like have him talk about it, and do that kind of stuff. Listening to what have I been listening to? Old Funeral. Kind of, yeah. Old Funeral. Lungfish, as usual. And my buddy has kind of been trying to force King Crimson on me a little bit. So I've been doing a little bit of listening to Crimson. And then I think that's about it. I'm going to look on my phone real quick if there's anything else that I'm like missing way off the mark with. Like Talk and R Noir are like pretty big listens for me right now. And yeah. What about you, Serba?
I can't get enough Mayhem lately, or let me see. I was listening to Motley Crue, old Motley Crue. I listened to Theater of Pain and went, wow. And I always listen to Urfaust. I had Sacred Reich was the last thing on my turntable. And let me see.
My answers were not very. While you're thinking about that, let me say the one I was going to say that you maybe wouldn't think that would be interesting is like I'm a huge Arctic Monkeys fan, so I've been listening to a shit ton of the Arctic Monkeys back again lately. So.
Yeah. So and then I listened to Black Sabbath Iron Man in the car with my kid a lot because I told him it's a song about the superhero Iron Man. So we listened to that a lot, and he hums it. He runs around the house humming the riff.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. So that's what I've been listening to. Let me think. I loved the Netflix series Russian Doll. I just saw film-wise. I just saw Us, which is a new movie by Jordan Peele, who did Get Out. Speaking of horror films, and I'm in the middle of reading the Rotting Christ book.
Yeah, very cool.
I just fired that one up.
Non Surveillum.
Yeah.
What about you, man? I want to hear what you're listening to and watching and doing shit like that.
So, because I run the podcasts, it tends to be I interviewed a band called Valtari last night, so I listened to all their stuff. I'm interviewing a band called Horizonist tomorrow, so I was listening to their stuff. So it tends to be a bit bland. It's just like, hey, this is the music I'm interviewing people for.
That's how the show is. Like, that's how Bsogm has totally changed how I listen to music.
Yeah.
Because now, like, I used to listen to music for fun, and now I'm just like, I gotta...
Oh, man, I'm obligated to listen to...
I was like, I had to listen to the 6th, 7th, and 8th record by some band that I only like one record on.
Yeah, I can definitely write. It's kind of damaging to your ability to listen to kind of enjoyable music or newer music, but that's what we do, I guess.
I was inspired because I saw Metallica and reviewed their show. I was listening to a bunch of Metallica last couple of weeks.
Oh, so unique.
Well, like I couldn't remember the last time I like listened to Ride the Lightning start to finish. Fired it up.
Okay.
Anyway.
My man poses.
Anyway, Ben was answering the question.
So what are you watching and stuff like that? Are you doing TV shows or movies or stuff like that?
So I've been trying to get through The Sopranos recently. I think third season of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and in terms of reading, not enough. I mean, I can totally relate to you, Damian. Just the fact that you feel like you should be reading, but you're not reading enough. So
Yeah.
But I actually have another podcast, so I actually do a bit of research for that. So that sort of takes up my reading.
What's the other?
It's called The Eclecticast, and it's just me and a friend. Totally original idea. We just talk about random topics. So the last one I was talking about nuclear weapons accidents.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Damn. Yeah, I get real weird on Wikipedia. Like Wikipedia changed my life. Like I've lost. That's kind of like what I do instead of read. Sometimes it's like reading Wikipedia, but reading a book is always preferable. It has a good, strong narrative. But yeah, dude, I don't know if you have anything else. You said that was your last question, but this has been tremendous. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, man.